6 o'clock. Thank you everyone for being here at our August 22nd Select Board meeting. If you join me to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So thanks everyone for being here tonight. This is just like the olden days with a room full of people. It's great to see an audience at one of our meetings. I'm going to start down with Jennifer Stacy and ask each member of the board to introduce themselves.
Yes, I'm Jennifer Stacy. Anything else I need to say, or just?
No, just your name.
Okay, Jennifer Stacy.
Mark Lamb.
Craig Barger.
I'm Dottie Fulgenetti, Town Administrator.
Connor Reed.
And we have first item on our agenda tonight, our two guests, Representative Carol Doherty, Senator Walter Timilty. Thank you both for being here tonight. And we're going to ask you to give us a legislative update.
I'd be glad to. So should we stand or remain seated?
You can, whatever you feel better, but the microphone, it will catch you better if you are right in front of it. So the microphones are not amplified, but they are picking you up for ECAT, for the cables.
Okay, so.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight.
So, do you want to toss a coin to see who goes first?
I'll defer.
Thank you.
I'll defer.
So if you can hear us from a seated position, that would be more comfortable, I'd say. So I want to first thank the chair, Dottie Fulgenetti, for inviting us here, and for the rest of the select board to entertain a few remarks from us. Dottie was very clear about the limited amount of time that we have available so that we're not interrupting your business. So we'll do our best. I first want to say that it is always a delight for me to come to Easton for various events and cultural and otherwise that I have been invited to participate in. I am always welcomed with a very warm welcome, and I would say open arms, but that's a bit cheeky of me to say that. So, but nonetheless, I always enjoy coming to Easton. I have been here to speak at various veterans events. I attended the Economic Development Committee meeting last week, which was very informative. I met this gentleman there while I was there, so I was glad about that. I have presented at Eagle Scouts meetings. I have been to police and fire activities, even as far away with the fire chief and his company to Fall River to witness a training session there, so I was very pleased about that. And I'm also a Lions Club member in the town of Easton, so I'm very pleased about that. And all of that for me is to expand my level of understanding of what goes on in the town of Easton. And even though I represent only one precinct, 6, and will expand that representation to include 5 and 4A the next time around, it's very important for me to really make my decisions based on my knowledge of what the community is doing. So I also want to say that I work with the senator. We work very well together, and Senator Brady as well. So we represent the same people in the town of Easton. And so on many issues, it's really important to us for our ability to collaborate, to develop partnerships, not only with one another, but the people in the town as well, select board, with Connor, and with you as well. So I just want to talk very briefly about earmarks. I have been able to present recommendations for earmarks for various community projects. Some of those earmarks have been successful. $330,000 for the Foundry Street Transportation Improvement Program, which has been authorized in the House. So I was very delighted to be able to do that as a freshman legislator. I guess that's a big thing. And $100,000 for the mitigation of the wetlands in the floodplain at the Sam Wright Field. So I'm very pleased to be able to do that. The senator is going to add the earmarks that he was able to obtain as a senator, and a very formidable list, I have to say. So we have also, Dottie asked if I might just mention some important pieces of legislation. If you've been following the work of the legislature, we adopted a reproductive health care bill as a result of the decision made by the Supreme Court to strike down Roe v. Wade. We have a very comprehensive Veterans Benefits Bill that was adopted. There's a clean energy and offshore wind piece of legislation that's very critical to the economy and to clean energy going forward here in the Commonwealth. A very comprehensive mental health bill that includes resources for training, more beds, more pediatric psychiatry that would be available, and all of the things that you hear about that are essential to the well-being of people, not only here in Easton, in the 3rd Bristol District, but also in the Commonwealth. And lastly, well, sports betting. For some reason, that was a piece of legislation that was very interesting to a lot of people. And for all of the time that I have sat in the legislature, people would say to me, well, what about that sports betting bill? What about that sports betting bill? So I was delighted when we adopted it and the governor signed that sports betting bill. And lastly, there was a modest increase, and I look at Connor for that because I talk with Connor and I talk with members of the select board about what the needs and wants are here. And one of the things that Connor said was that we should be advocating for more local aid, and I think that that's absolutely right. There was a modest increase in UGA, as they say, or local aid here, and also a modest increase in Chapter 70 funds for the school department. And lastly, I have been in conversation with the superintendent of schools about the Student Opportunity Act and how Easton, as well as a number of other communities in the Commonwealth, don't benefit as greatly as the gateway cities perhaps might benefit. And so one of the challenges, I think, as a legislator is to think about how that formula applies and how it might expand over time to include more resources for the community here, as well as the community in the city of Taunton. So I'm going to stop there and give the senator some of that 15 minutes that we have available to us. And then questions, I guess. Thank you, Senator.
Well, thank you very much, Representative Doherty. Chair Fulgenetti, again, thank you very much for this opportunity. Select Board Member Barger, Select Board Member Stacy, Select Board Member Stebbins, Select Board Member Lamb. We're greatly honored to be here tonight with you all, and of course, Connor, all our department heads and our citizens here. Thank you for the privilege of working for you folks. Just a little bit of an update, and it is a privilege to work with my partner here, Representative Doherty. Yes. We had the privilege, great privilege of working, as we all did, with Representative Claire Cronin, and now we're moving forward and have for quite some time for the very best interests of the people of this town, which we hold very dear to ourselves. So thank you. Just a few items to start off. Earmarks amendments that I filed in the Senate budget process, which carried the day. And thank you, Representative Doherty, for supporting the conference committee with the earmarks. $5,000 for the Easton Food Pantry. We all know our food pantry does great work, so thank you to our food pantry here in town, people who are truly doing wonderful work for the most vulnerable amongst us. So thank you to our food pantry. I also filed an amendment that was successfully adopted in the state Senate, securing $50,000 for the construction and design of an inclusive playground at the Richard Olmsted School. Now, this won't get us all the way there, but part of the way there. And again, I thank you for your collaboration, Representative Doherty, and your school department and our superintendent. I also, with the collaboration of Tom Broussard and Auditor Bump, secured $50,000 through an amendment I filed in the Senate budget process for $50,000 for the Oaks Ames Memorial Hall renovations. Now, of course, that won't get us all the way there, but it's a help. And obviously, I'm committed in each and every budget vehicle going forward with the Olmsted School Playground and, of course, Oaks Ames Hall to keep on working and to keep on, for lack of a better term, to keep on adding to what the mix and what we need to make these projects happen and come to fruition. Also, each and every year, and I made my inaugural speech in the State Senate, there's a tradition in the State Senate, as there is in the House of Representatives, that you make an inaugural speech and you choose a topic that's very important to yourself and your district. My inaugural speech was on substance use disorder, and I offered that speech in support of an amendment seeking $20,000 for Wings of Hope and each of the other 8 substance use disorder coalitions that I would proudly say work for, as we all do. And of course, here in Easton, we have Wings of Hope that truly does God's work, supporting those who suffer and live with substance use disorder and their families. Because we know when a loved one is afflicted with substance use disorder, the family is as well. So I thank Wings of Hope. This amendment this year secured $20,000 for Wings of Hope. They do wonderful work. I'm a big believer when you have local organizations, as we have so many great local organizations here in this community that do great work for all of us, to put the resources in their hands and let them do what they do so well. In a general government bond bill, I filed an amendment seeking $50,000 for repairs and upgrades to our Council on Aging. Of course, here we are tonight. We all know our Council on Aging does great work here. And to each and every member of the Council on Aging, and of course our director, I thank you. Also, I filed an amendment seeking $250,000 for PFAS treatment with our town water system. This amendment was successfully adopted and it carried the day for the overall version, and of course it's been signed into law. And again, thank you for your collaboration, Representative.
Of course.
Also, in a transportation bond bill, I filed an amendment seeking $50,000 for repairs, transportation bond bill. I repeated myself there for a moment, excuse me. $30,000 for the installation of e-bike parking and universal charging stations here in the town. And that's part of the transportation bond bill. It was successfully adopted in the Senate and carried the day for the overall bill. I also filed an amendment in the Senate transportation bond bill seeking $50,000 for the installation of electric vehicle charging stations here in town and the infrastructure that goes with it. And that was successfully adopted as well and carried the day on the final version. So with that, I'm going to shift gears for a moment to home rule petitions. Back in January, a home rule petition that I filed on behalf of the town and at the request of the town with a great co-sponsor and Representative Doherty, adding liquor licenses. 3 additional was signed into law on January 5th, 2022, and I suspect maybe that might be on the docket for tonight, but that's very important for all of us for economic development. So I applaud the town in taking that initiative. And of course, we have a home rule petition right now that I filed over the summer at the request of the town, and Representative, thank you for co-sponsoring. Senate Bill 2972, which is an act authorizing the Select Board of Easton to lease certain parcels of land. And this, obviously, Select Board Member Lamb and Barger and, of course, Chair Fulgenetti, we've had discussions about the renovations of Oaks Ames Hall. This is a linchpin. And this will, of course, allow the town to lease certain parcels of land to augment the parking. This bill was reported favorably out of committee on July 14th. It was being reviewed by Senate Council. I forwarded a question from Senate Council to the town. The town was right quick in getting back a response to our Senate Legal Counsel. And the vetting process is ongoing, but should be finished up shortly, and I'm confident that we'll have it out of the State Senate and in the very capable hands of Representative Doherty shortly. So with that, I thank you very much. Also, Rep. Doherty mentioned some key legislative bills that we have worked on in both the Senate and the House. The Mental Health ABC Act, which I voted on in the last session, voted on again. The House has concurred. We have a great bill that's going to improve access to mental health care, which we all know if you break an ankle, you break a leg, you go to an emergency room, you're treated. It's been a different story in our society, unfortunately and sadly, regarding mental health treatment. This is to improve access and also awareness as well in society, and make it very important also for our youngsters, that our youngsters have access to mental health treatment quickly, and education for all of us, of course. And we need to remove stigmas and barriers, and we believe that this bill will do that. So I believe it's going to be crucial for wellness in society, and we're very proud of it, and I'm certainly very proud of it. Also, we voted on a reproductive health bill this year in the Massachusetts State Senate back on July 13th. It passed 40-0, so I'm very proud of that. It was very important that we did that. We also have led the way in climate change. Climate change here in the Massachusetts State Legislature, we are leading the nation in terms of what we've done to create benchmarks in society for all of us and to move ourselves forward in protecting, obviously, our Earth and our planet. And beyond that, sports wagering, as Rep. Doherty alluded to, prior to the enactment of the sports wagering bill, I believe every single day I had a constituent ask me about sports wagering. And obviously it's something that we're losing revenue. Most of the New England states have engaged in sports gambling for several years. People do it with offshore accounts. Of course, there's a black market, and people do it by way of traveling out of state, of course, as I alluded to a moment ago, to places like Rhode Island and New Hampshire. So it was long overdue. We were losing revenue, and obviously constituents were clamoring to engage in it. We believe we put in safeguards and benchmarks in terms of protecting our citizenry as well, and protecting our local universities. Our local universities were big on the fact that they were concerned about athletes being victimized with gaming. So provisions were built into this that you cannot gamble on local university sports teams unless it's a national tournament, AKA March Madness. So people will still be able to wager on March Madness, which obviously is very important, in the National Football College Championship. and anything else they would like to wager on if it's a national tournament pertaining to collegiate athletics. A couple of highlights from our budget as well. The budget is a $52.7 billion document. I believe it has put provisions in to lift up everybody in society. No one is left behind with this budget document, and no one ever should be. One highlight that I'd like to, a couple of highlights from our budget. We have put in $15 million to support teachers of color, including $7.5 million for Tomorrow's Teachers program to provide scholarships to people committed to teaching in public schools, and $7.5 million for loan repayment for teachers of color. Also, and this is a topic I've had the privilege of appearing in front of this board before, it's a big initiative that I've launched regarding cybersecurity and our National Guard. Back on March 26th, I hosted a forum, a roundtable discussion with our National Guard under the leadership of General Keefe and each and every one of the communities that I represent. I'm privileged to currently represent 10 towns in the Norfolk, Bristol, and Plymouth district. It will evolve with the redistricting process to the Norfolk, Plymouth, and Bristol district in 7 communities. And I'm very excited to say that I will be representing all of Easton going forward. On the last day of February, I appeared in front of this board and invited the town to participate, and I thank the town for engaging with us on this process. Unfortunately, cyber warfare and cybersecurity is a big concern. It's not something of the future, it's something that's here with us right now. As we're all painfully aware, any community can be hit with a ransomware attack, and it might cost millions of dollars for the town to extricate itself from the situation, whether it's a rogue nation, a criminal entity, or a criminal enterprise. Whatever the case may be, we are all vulnerable. The National Guard is outstanding at cyber warfare and cyber defense. They have 2 cybersecurity battalions. So on March 26th, I was able to bring each and every one of the towns, I invited each and every one of the towns that I represented, and most were able to come or follow up later, to engage the National Guard and their cybersecurity warfare experts and defense experts. And I thank the town of Easton for collaborating with myself on this, and also to keep myself in the loop, and obviously to keep each and every one of us in the loop in terms of engaging with the National Guard. It's very important. They are outstanding at what they do, and they stand ready, willing, and able to support us and protect us. So with this most recent budget, we put in $2.5 million for the Massachusetts Cybersecurity Innovation Fund, including $1.5 million to continue partnerships with community colleges and state universities to provide cybersecurity workforce training to students and cybersecurity services to municipalities, nonprofits, and small businesses. We have the talent and the resources here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have a university system that's second to none. And with these monies, we're starting to create a process and a foundation to train leaders of tomorrow in cybersecurity defense to help us protect the Commonwealth and protect each and every entity. So with that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions each and every one of you might have. It's a privilege, as I know Rep. Doherty feels this way, to work for you folks. It is also my privilege to represent, going forward, the entire town. In the current situation, I represent 2/3 of the town, but let me say this, and I know Rep. Doherty agrees with me. If someone calls looking for assistance, we never ask for an address. We're all working together here, and we're all working together, our local officials, our state officials, and we're here to work for you folks, and we'll never forget that. So thank you all very much. It's an honor to be here.
Excellent. Questions from the board? Craig, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I don't have anything.
Mark?
Nope, very thorough. Thank you.
Jamie?
And thank you for the representation.
Thank you.
Thank you both for your time. That was very interesting. And
If I might, Chair Fulgenetti, I'd like to add one more thing, and it's very local, very quickly. When I first was seated in the legislature, I had an email during the pandemic from one of the teachers at the high school asking if I would meet with the students who were seniors, because they had an idea about how we ought to provide more mental health days in our days for absences for children at the middle and the high school level. And that simple email grew into a piece of legislation which I filed. The legislation, unfortunately, was passed out of committee and sent to study, which is basically the graveyard for legislation. But that piece of legislation captured more attention. Just recently, I was interviewed by Channel 10 about that very piece of legislation. And so it is my intention, it's just these kids in high school who are now out of school for 2 years, my intention in the next legislative session is to submit another piece of legislation that says basically the same thing. We know that our children, as a result of the pandemic, and our mental health bill will help take care of some of those problems, those behavioral and emotional issues that children have been facing. But I think that providing an opportunity to raise awareness to the issues that these children at the high school raised, that actually rose to the level of a piece of legislation that was filed and that had a hearing. So I want to say thank you very much to the school department, to the high school teacher, and to those students who are off and away, probably entering their junior year in college this coming September. So thank you. Thank you for letting me say that.
Sure. Well, I just want to thank you both because in addition to your work, which you're everywhere, we see you at every event, it means a lot to us and to the people that live in Easton that you are hands and feet on the ground for us. You care about the things that we care about, climate, I made some notes here, climate, housing, transportation, mental health, workforce, and equity. And you've touched, between the two of you, on just about everything on that list. You're available to your constituents, so I know that not just available, but immediately and readily available. I don't know how many people at home know that. I'm not trying to rile up a whole bunch of more phone calls and emails to you, but you know, I used to think that you never could reach your legislator, that, you know, that just wasn't a thing, and you're very helpful to your constituents and available. We have not had you in for an update in a long time, but we get regular updates from them, so we have a very good partnership and relationship with our legislative team, and that means a lot to us, that I can pick up the phone or text you if I have a question or I need some help, and you're always responsive to me and the board and Connor, so thank you very much. We appreciate the update.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Madam Chair, thank you very much. Thank you, Rep. Doherty. If I might add for a moment, Madam Chair, the future for this town is incredibly bright. It really is. This spring I've had the privilege of hosting all of our Ames Women's State Championship basketball team. And what a delightful group, and the town, I know, is incredibly proud, not just of their achievements on the court, but off the court as well, how they conduct themselves. They're just wonderful people, wonderful young people who the future is incredibly bright. And also Wings of Hope. I was privileged to host a delegation from Wings of Hope from our middle school and our high school of children and students. And again, they just are just incredibly impressive young people, young adults. And this town has a very bright future. And the people I've met in your school system, whether the educators, the administrators, or your students, are just incredibly impressive. And I think that's a great reflection of your leadership here in town government, and of course your department heads. So I thank you. It's a privilege to work for each and every one of you.
Great. Well,
Thank
we
you.
appreciate you being here, and Lauren, thank you for being here as well. And we look forward to continuing working with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was remiss earlier, and thank you, Madam Chair, my legislative aide, Lauren Howard, who does a wonderful job working with me.
My
So,
legislative aide, Matthew O'Brien.
Oh, I'm sorry, Matthew, I didn't even recognize you over there.
We're all here.
so we're a team.
All right.
We're a team.
Well, have a good night, and thank you for taking time out of
Thank
your
you.
busy schedule.
Thank you, Madam
Thank
Chair.
you. Nice to see you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all.
So the next item that we have on the agenda is the police chief update, reestablishment of school resource officer program. I neglected to remind people that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast on cable television. I'm still trying to work out the kinks in getting back to live meetings. So you see the cameras, and we thank ECAT for being here. Also, just as a reminder, if there are comments and questions, please be requested to speak through me, the chair, and I'll ask you to come up to the microphone, introduce yourself, give your name and address, and all questions will be directed through the chair. So, Chief Boone, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you. Sure, so right out of the gate, just want to touch on a little bit of the scheduling challenge on our end. The school committee's meeting Thursday to talk about this, but what we're here to kind of give an overview of tonight is some good news of, I think, really productive conversations that we've had with school leadership, both at Easton Public Schools and with the regional schools as part of Chief Boone's, I think, first week or two on the job. This was a huge priority for him to start these discussions, and be focused on proactive and community-based police work and getting folks back in the community in a positive way. Chief, you want to just give an update on the program and what you're working towards?
Yeah, so just to step back, I've been in my role now as new chief for going on 6 weeks now. And part of what I really want to do is reinvest in the community. And I think the pandemic really set us back in a lot of ways, not just the Easton Police Department, but our profession. We almost became invisible. We were operating in a way where we weren't communicating with anyone. We were avoiding people at all costs. We were socially distancing. And so I think now's the time to start rebuilding those relationships. We have 4 recruits graduating the police academy in the next week. And so we're finally at a point, I think, with our staffing levels where we can get to a point where have this great opportunity to re-engage with our schools. And I'm a big believer in the young people in this town. I grew up in this town then it was the DARE program. I grew up having those role models, and I'm very excited to try to re-implement that program sometime in the school year. I can take any questions on the program if anyone has any, but that is what I'm trying to do.
Sure. How does that fit into your bigger vision of community policing? I noticed that police, fire, DPW, you're everywhere now at the town pool. I see great pictures all over social media with that kind of an interaction.
Yeah, really from day one, from May and July 11th when I hit the ground running, it hasn't been just me, it's been our staff is fantastic, and they've been engaging in everything we can. We brought popsicles and ice cream down to the kids at the town pool. I have an additional officer riding the motorcycle, engaging with residents and motorists. We have our ATV program where we're actively engaging with kids that we see on the street. We're doing a lot of different programs like that. My commitment to community policing is we can't be successful without the community. And so it's all about us working together.
Sure. And I would just throw in another comment through COVID when you say that you weren't able to connect as much. I think you were in a lot of birthday parades.
We did. That's the one thing we were doing regularly. But we changed our operations,
right.
And a lot of FaceTime was gone. We were taking reports over the phone on misdemeanor offenses, so to speak. And that might work in a big city where you can do that, but that's not who we are, and we really got away from what we were good at.
Yeah.
And it was that interaction where people trusted us and counted on us, and that's the direction we're going.
Right. So, Craig?
Just a quick question about the SOR. All schools, or how do you envision this, Chief?
So my goal, and it's really based on some conversations I've had with both superintendents, would be to have one officer for our Easton school system, and maybe a floater type of being a resource to all the schools when necessary, and potentially a separate officer at the regional school. And these are based really preliminary on conversations I've had. That's a program that was successful in the past. We had great officers that were doing that program. Again, we fell at the mercy of our staffing, which 3 years ago we probably hit the lowest levels we did. And then COVID came, and it really gave us a reason to back away from everything. So that's how I see the program starting off. One for Easton Public Schools and one for the regional school.
Thank you.
And could I, Dottie, just add, so an important piece there is, the chief just touched on it, staff levels were at an incredibly low point in the wake of COVID because of the anticipated economic damage from the pandemic. We were down to 36 officers, making programs like this desirable as they can be, just difficult to do out of staffing. So we've been able to use American Rescue Plan funds to start staffing up, and we're working with the schools on that as well. I think, not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Just giving a little bit more background, about your understanding of these programs, because unfortunately, there's events in the news far too frequently, whether it's relating to an issue of mistreatment of a member of the public, or it's something, some sort of violence being perpetrated at a school. Just talk about, you've, in your conversations with both superintendents, been, I think, very mindful, recognizing that, you know, the point of this program is to be positive and proactive, but that we understand that for some kids and families that has not been their experience with law enforcement. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on how this program can be part of making a positive change there, as well as making sure we're super clear that we're not framing this as a security program.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. The intent of the officer is not to be armed security at the school. In fact, we don't want our officers dressed in a regular police uniform. They tend to dress down in a polo shirt, and they blend in. It's not about armed security, and it's really about building trust with the students, and they are our future. And to build that relationship at an early age, it really only helps the community, the police department, the people that live here. And I had positive interactions growing up with police officers, and I recognize that not a lot of people did or do, even today. But we want to change all that. We want to show them what a good police officer is and what we do in a community like Easton. I don't know if that covered everything, but
I think that's it's important context. I appreciate it.
yeah.
So the recognition of the need for this is outstanding. You guys are, I think, absolutely going in the right direction. And the voids that were, you know, recently there, I think were felt through the community. And, you know, we keep talking about this program, but earlier you mentioned when we were in school, they had DARE.
Right.
So what is this? Could you talk any more about what will an officer be doing in the schools? I mean, more about what is the program?
So the DARE program really, it did go away and it was replaced with SROs. The SRO became more of a general resource.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just tailored towards substance abuse. A lot of kids in the schools have family problems, or their parents may be in a position where we may be, unfortunately, they may have interaction with law enforcement, and we recognize that. We want to provide resources to the children. So it's all encompassing. It's not just targeted towards drug abuse resistance like it was for us. It's mental health. It's partnering with different programs that kids may need. So it's not just a one-stop shop anymore.
Mm-hmm. Great.
There's specialized training that we actually send the SROs to as well. I have some information on the NASRO program. There is an actual program to certify you as a resource officer. So it's not you know, the
you
blue
don't just
uniform
pick an officer
going.
and throw them in there. Yeah.
No, and it's not about police first. It's about teacher first. It really is. We're not there to be taking criminal action against students. We recognize, and I recognize, that that's the age where you're supposed to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And it's not supposed to define the rest of your life. So we recognize that, and that's what the program is. It's to help. That's what we're here for.
Well, I love your outlook of everything.
I think a great example Superintendent Cabral brought up when we were speaking about this is just establishing a point person for communication, and that's why it's so important that there be a dedicated officer. We tried sharing because of resource limitations, but between the public school system and regional school, it's 7 buildings. It's just, you're not setting someone up to succeed. A great example, as you know, the chief alluded to, is that unfortunately there may be times where a student has a parent who maybe is incarcerated, and having the communication through the police department to the schools, so that, you know, the adjustment counselors and administrators there know that for that student it is a huge priority.
So I'll just say, speaking to it and having seen it work successfully, and knowing that the relationships you're building, so that when the police come to the building, it's not always something's on, you know, there's a huge problem now, and you guys are able to de-escalate. Let's face it,
Right.
When it comes to use of force, we can mitigate getting to the highest rungs through communication and through education, and certainly your officers, and I'm sure the ones you'll put in the schools will be able to do just that, and to help kids feel more relaxed around law enforcement. This is exactly what we're doing. We're building a better community because of it, not just here, but any other community where they're going to have interaction with law enforcement. either in a crisis or some other reason. So I think it's absolutely a great way to be building trust, and that's really what you're doing.
And we want to encourage positive interactions. You know, seeing the police isn't always a negative thing, so we want to change that mindset, that we can have positive interactions. Even when things aren't going well, we can be someone that a student may want to talk to.
Thank you.
I was really glad to hear that you are so focused on this community policing, building trust, proactive approach, as opposed to a lot of the other models we're seeing in places that are gaining some traction for the wrong reasons around security guards and arming teachers and arming police officers in the school. So thank you for that. One thing that you mentioned in the certification, I was curious to hear about the ongoing training. You hear a lot about this vulnerable kind of unique population. There's a lot of developmental information that comes out. We're constantly learning new things about how to work with this population. So what kind of ongoing training is there in addition to certification?
So the MPTC, the Municipal Police Training Committee, they actually have a specific in-service annual training just for SROs. So
Great.
If we had an SRO in the school, they actually run them during school vacation week, so they're not away from the school. So depending on what the curriculum is that's set by the state, like the last few years, they're really focused on mental health. It's really been a focus. Next year it could shift. It could shift to drug abuse resistance. It could, so it's they get mandatory training that they have to have just to maintain the certification as a police officer. But the state actually tailors training specifically for the SRO, and they have to do that annually.
Fantastic. The other question I had is, you'd mentioned the 4 recruits and talked about, so how is the officer they'll be either selected or volunteer for this role? Like, how will that play out with?
Well, there's a collective bargaining component to it, so I do I will post the position as it's considered a specialty assignment, and the superintendent. This is something we've already talked about. Both of us will meet with the officers that's requested to be an SRO, and then we'll make a determination collaboratively.
Great. I really like that it's someone who wants to be in that role and isn't.
And that's part of the selection process. Like,
Fantastic.
you should be, there's boxes to check where you should enjoy working with students. You should do all these host of other things. So that is part of the selection process.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I think this is wonderful, and it's a big initiative to get going right out of the gate.
Yeah.
So I can tell that it is a priority of yours. I think it's a wonderful way to introduce a new relationship with the new superintendent at Southeastern Regional, right early on in the year, and to strengthen the relationships with everybody in the Easton school system. I really appreciate you bringing this forward. I had a lot of people come to me when we weren't able to have the SRO for a couple of years, and their concerns about that. My kids enjoyed having that relationship with the SROs when they were in the school, and they just became somebody that was in the ecosystem that they knew that they could talk to. So,
It's funny you say that, because 2 of our latest recruits got into the field because of Officer Healy, who's now retired. He was a coach and an SRO, and they formed that relationship where they started thinking about being a police officer where they never would have before. So it actually came up in the interview process that's why they were actually applying to be a police officer. So I think I'm probably a product of that too, having Mike Fox, who was our DARE officer, who's now long since retired, but having those interactions is what steered me towards the field as well.
Well, continuing the strong communication and relationships is really important through the schools or through the relationships with the community. So thank you for recognizing that and moving that forward, and we wish you a lot of success with the program.
Thank you, and thank you for the support. We wouldn't be able to do it without a partnership. So,
do we have any comments or questions from anyone? All right. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Chief.
Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a few one-day liquor licenses. So the first one is the Easton Chamber of Commerce. I don't see anyone here from the chamber. Lisa DeVos from the Easton Chamber of Commerce has asked for a one-day beer and wine license approved at the May 23rd, 2020. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm saying this wrong. Lisa DeVos of the Easton Chamber of Commerce has asked that the one-day beer and wine license that we already approved at the May 23rd, 2022 Select Board meeting be allowed a venue change. The event, a wine tasting and art show, was supposed to be held at Oak Ames Hall. Now it's going to be held in the Queesit Gardens at 51 Main Street. The date and the time of the event remains the same, Thursday, September 22nd, 2022, from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. Tickets are on sale through the chamber. And so this is really just a venue change. So if somebody would like to make a motion to amend that one-day license.
So moved, Barger.
Second, Lamb.
Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. Okay, the next one is Smith Farm at Borderlands for Veterans Appreciation Day. Marie, do you want to come up to the table? Thank you for being here. Rich Eastman and Frank Altieri have applied for a one-day beer and wine license at the Smith Farm at Borderlands Veterans Appreciation Day fundraiser. That will be held at Smith Farm at Borderland, which is at 90 Bay Road, Saturday, September 17th from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. An Easton Police detail is not required for this event. Frank, I'm not sure if you want to come up too. You're here for a couple of them. So Marie, if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your event.
Sure, I'm Marie Kelly. I am an Easton resident and I am a member of the Smith Farm at Borderland Board of Advisors. I've been involved with this nonprofit for a number of years now. And this fall, in lieu of our annual golf tournament fundraiser, we wanted to open it up to a more community-friendly event and invite the community out to our beautiful space in Borderland State Park. We've been the grateful recipient of Community Preservation Act funds, so thank you for that. We had 2 rounds of funding that allowed us to renovate the exterior completely. And for anyone who's been to Smith Farm, we are located on the Bay Road side of the park, and what was a house that was on the verge of falling down a number of years ago is now a beautiful, solid structure that will be there for many, many years. And our fundraising has continued to focus on now the interior, as well as adding a deck with a handicap access ramp. Easton Legacy Fund of the South Coast Community Foundation just recently gave us a $3,500 grant to start that process. So this event will be both a combination of honoring and recognizing our veterans in the community, as well as raising funds to complete that deck, installation. So it'll be open to anyone who wants to attend. It's $20 admission fee, free for veterans. There'll be music, there'll be food, there'll be hopefully
Shoveltown beer and pizza.
Shoveltown beer and pizza. And we'll have lawn games. The Children's Museum in Easton is offering crafts that are going to have a veterans theme to them for the children who attend. So we're hoping it to be a real family-friendly opportunity for people to just gather and recognize our veterans and help us raise funds for a good cause. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any comments or questions?
Nope.
So I just want to thank you. I know the work that you do at Smith Farm to support our veterans, particularly veterans that are experiencing trauma and support. And we're, Jamie himself is a veteran. We appreciate and we really support any organization that supports our veterans. So thank you for the great work that you do.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. So if somebody would like to make a motion to award the one-day beer and wine license to Smith Farms on September 17th, 2022, 12 to 6 p.m.
So moved, Barger.
Second, Lamb.
Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous.
Great. I should just add, for anyone who's interested, they can visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/Smith Farm at Borderland. The flyer is up with instructions for how you can register ahead of time, but we will be accepting people to walk in that day. So,
Great.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
So Frank, the next one is also you. Paula Papineau and Frank Altieri have applied for a one-day beer and wine license for a private event to be held at 50 Oliver Street on Sunday, September 18th, 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. An Easton police detail is not required for this event, and this is a public event, so we don't have to.
Right, it's a private event, yeah.
A private event, so we don't have any further details, but any questions or comments from the board?
No.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion to award the one-day beer and wine license for the private party 50 Oliver Street to the Shoveltown Brewery?
So moved, Barger.
Second, Lamb.
Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. And next, again, we have, you're busy with the Shoveltown Brewery. Flynn Farm, so we have Jessica Flynn coming up. It says Megan Flynn and Frank Altieri have applied for a one-day beer and wine license for the Flynn Farms Farm Fest at 492 Bay Road, Easton, on Sunday, September 25th, from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. An Easton police detail is not required for this event, so thanks for being here tonight. If you could just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the event.
Sure. I'm Jessica Flynn. Me and my husband own Flynn's Farm down on Bay Road. And we're hoping to have a fall festival this year. We're going to have hay rides and meet the animals, lawn games, hopefully some beer and pizza. We have an ice cream truck coming, and just fall festival things. Paint your own pumpkin, and lots of stuff for the community, and hopefully get kids out there. Get more people in the community to realize we're kind of on the other side of town, and just bring people together for a nice fall day, and that's about it.
I think that's wonderful. There's so many events going on in the fall, and I was recently looking for the cultural district was looking to do an event, and we were trying to pick which weekend to do it, and there's a lot going on. So
yeah, there is.
The
We're trying to
festival is around that time, and so, but I think I really like to hear events that are going on, like you said, on the other side of town, so that it's not all. It seems like sometimes there's a cluster of events all in the same area. So,
Right. A lot of people don't even realize we're down there.
Right,
so.
and hopefully when they're down there, they can look at some of the other assets like Wheaton Farm and
Wheaton Farm's right across the street.
There's a lot
Beautiful,
to look at
yeah.
down there.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you. Any comments or questions?
It's a great family. We've known the family for a long, long time, so.
Thanks, Greg.
I'll just say we've been doing our own fall harvest. We're on Foundry Street near Southeastern Regional, and unfortunately now I've got to compete with you guys. So the 30 people that used to come to ours, I don't think we're going to be able to compete, especially now with Frank in your corner.
Hopefully it's not the same day.
Well, now the calendar's booked. So thank you. It sounds great, and we will be there.
Great, perfect.
Awesome. All right, who would like to make a motion and a second to award the one-day beer and wine license for the Flynn Farm Farm Fest on September 25th, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m.?
So moved, Barger.
Second, Lamb.
Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Have a
so
great
much.
time.
Thank you.
Very much. And I assume that people can find your information on Facebook?
Yes, we'll be doing a lot more posting now on social media now that this has been confirmed. So we'll get all the details out there and on Facebook, and we have some flyers that we'll put out. So,
And,
absolutely.
Frank, I just want to, I know that you're not the focus of these, but I do want to thank you and the folks at Shoveltown Brewery. You've been instrumental in a lot of things that I've been involved in, like the Cultural District Music Concert Series, of which this Wednesday night is the last. I'm not trying to make a plug, but I guess it's turned out that way. This will be the last concert in the series this Wednesday, and the Shoveltown Brewery has been to all of them and been a really great sponsor and partner in that. And the other events, you're here quite a bit, so we appreciate that.
Appreciate it. I'd just like to give a little plug too, if you don't mind. When we serve beverages at events like this, it's not about people getting drunk or anything like that. That's the reason why the senator spoke about more liquor licenses being available, being an economic driver. People enjoy having a beverage when they go to an event. And if you look at Europe and other places, it's been part of their lifestyle forever. So we don't condone, and in fact we're very aggressive against over service. And we think though that beer can have a part in a lot of events and should be considered.
Terrific. Thank you so much. We
Thank you.
appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Sean.
Thank you.
All right, next we have vote for the Affordable Housing Trust property resale at 26 Poquonica Avenue. So we have Wayne and Nikki, are you going to come up?
So just to tee Wayne and Nikki up, as for the board's recollection, in late 2019, early 2020, the Affordable Housing Trust acquired 2 parcels of land with the intention of creating affordable family housing. In June of 2020, the trust issued an RFP for a nonprofit to develop 1 unit at Poquonica and up to 2 at Morse Road. Habitat for Humanity submitted the only response, and we have Wayne Beitler and Nikki Justumian here tonight to give all the good details about this program.
That really sums it up. Thank you for that. There's not a whole lot more to add. This is an example of the Affordable Housing Trust having multiple year lead times for some of our larger projects. And as referenced in the more detailed memo in your agenda packet, one of the things we do try to do is be efficient with the per unit cost to the town. So we try to do these larger projects with several different units and try to have that investment be a relatively modest net per unit cost for each affordable unit. So these two parcels, one the trust bought on Poquonica Avenue, and then the other one the trust bought with the select board. You may remember doing this. It came out of Chapter 61, and the select board exercised its right of first refusal, designated the trust, and both of these ironically went to record right before lockdown. So that was an interesting time. And the likely nonprofit bidders did not have the capacity to respond for a while, which is part of the reason that, you know, it's a couple years later that we're here. But we reviewed the response from South Shore Habitat and found them very high ranking on all the evaluative criteria, and the trust voted to sell both properties to them to develop these affordable units and to make grants to help with the construction cost. And tonight, of course, we're seeking the separate votes, one for each property. It helps with the chain of title to have recordable documents, one per address. So we're looking for the select board to approve that sale.
Terrific. Nikki, thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you.
You've been the chair for how many years now?
I'm not sure. I should check my
Not
records.
enough. Not enough.
Quite a few.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at least.
Well, how
5
old's
now.
your daughter? Because she was born while you were on that.
I was on the trust. I don't know if I was the chair yet. So it's been at least 7 years I've been on.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun.
Craig, any comments or questions?
No, I just want to compliment Wayne and Nick for what they do for the town of Easton and for affordable housing.
Thank you.
Same, I applaud your work, I thank you for your work. This is a growing problem, and a couple months ago you guys presented it, and it's very glaring, so keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Wayne and Nikki, thank you both. One of the properties is adjacent to our property, so we're really excited that it's come out of Chapter 61 and ended up to be an affordable property for somebody, because we'll be looking at median home prices here, I think, later tonight, and it's unaffordable. It would have been unaffordable for me had I not bought 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I hope that some other families like us get a chance at being homeowners and starting to build family wealth through home ownership. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to give kudos to the Affordable Housing Trust in general. I represent the select board on the group, and it's just fantastic. Thank you for your leadership. The two of you really do a fantastic job steering the boat, and making sure that we are continuing to think about creative solutions to a really challenging problem that just gets more and more challenging. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of what we need to be doing, but it's fantastic, awesome, and in the right direction. So thank you.
If I gotcha.
And I would just say, we've talked about this for many years. In our master plan, we identified the way that we wanted housing and infill development and smaller projects to be balanced out with larger projects to create affordability so that people could stay in the community that they grew up in, or that their children could stay here and live close to them, or that their parents don't move out far away and make it harder to age with their parents. We just recently updated your housing production plan and action plan, and I'd encourage people to look at that and look at some of the statistics about the affordability and about the kind of housing that we're looking for and need. And part of your strategy over the years that's really worked out well is developing a relationship, being a proactive community, and working with partners like Brockton Area Multi-Services and Habitat for Humanity. And when I've talked to them, they've raved about the relationship and working with the town, and you particularly. And some of the best days that we have are when we go to the ribbon cuttings of these homes and we see that new family that's so grateful to be in the home. Yeah. You can't really capture that until you're there firsthand. So thank you so much for all that you do. We have 2 votes, and Craig has the motions for these.
I hereby move that the Easton Select Board authorize the Easton Affordable Housing Trust to sell a parcel of land and any improvements thereon known and numbered as 10 Morse Road in Easton, Bristol County, Commonwealth of Massachusetts for the price of 50 cents to South Shore Habitat for Humanity for the construction of permanently affordable family housing, and further to authorize the town administrator to execute and enter into any and all documents necessary to effectuate the sale of said properties as may be necessary or required.
Second, Lamb.
So that's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous.
I hereby move that the Easton Select Board authorize the Easton Affordable Housing Trust to sell a parcel of land and any improvements thereon known and numbered as 26 Poquonica Avenue at Easton, Bristol County, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, for the price of 50 cents to South Shore Habitat for Humanity for the construction of permanently affordable family housing, and further to authorize the town administrator to execute and enter into any and all documents necessary to effectuate the sale of said properties as may be necessary or required.
Second, Lamb.
So that's Bodger and Lamb again. All in favor? Unanimous. Great. Thank you so
all.
much for being here tonight. For your great work. If you want, do you have signature pages that you want us to?
Oh.
So we'll do that after the meeting, and Elizabeth will bring them to Town Hall tomorrow.
I have them here, so
Awesome.
we can do it after the meeting if you like.
That would be really helpful, yeah.
All right.
And then we can just have them in hand for when we start putting the closing package together.
Okay, perfect. So next we have a discussion and vote for acceptance of a gift of land to the Easton Conservation Commission, 300 Foundry Street, Lot 2, Easton, Mass.
So this is for Conservation Commission, but it is itself a part of an Affordable Housing Trust program. Same idea of a redevelopment that's been extremely successful. I can't say enough, procurement, coming from a chief procurement officer, is a dreadful thing. And for the Housing Trust in Wayne to be able to find ways to creatively reuse pieces of property, in this case that we had for quite some time. Since the 90s. To meet unmet needs in the community is great. And as part of that, there was a contingency, I believe, of the permitting that a portion of that had to be permanently restricted. So,
Yeah.
is there anything else to add there? Or?
Yeah, it's, and again, the multi-year lead time, we've been working on this since 2015, town meeting vote in 2016, and putting together the permitting and getting all the details in place, and the paperwork was quite a project, but we did get there. And so we have, 8 affordable bedrooms for folks with acquired brain injuries on the otherwise undevelopable upland section. And the rest of it, 12.5 acres as permanently protected conservation land.
Great. This stuff doesn't move very quickly, does it?
It does not. No.
Well, but when you
Pandemic
drive
still
by
helped.
and you see the building, it's a beautiful building now. They did a heck of a job building that.
Yeah, it's
Building
pretty
went pretty
exciting.
quickly.
Yeah, once we got that done. And I was in touch with them last week with the developers, and they have their occupancy permit, and they're looking to move residents in, in small numbers at a time at the end of this month.
Excellent. Was there a recommended motion for this?
Yes, there is.
Okay, great.
I hereby move to approve accepting the gift of 12.49 acres land on Foundry Street, shown as Lot 2 on Assessor's Map 16-R, parcel 97, to the town of Easton by and through the Easton Conservation Commission, subject to payment of taxes due, if any.
Second, Lamb.
So that's Bodger and Lamb. All in favor? Unanimous. Terrific.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for being here
Thank
tonight.
Thank you, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have the Easton Municipal Facilities, DPW, Police and Fire update for the replacement feasibility project.
Thank you, Dottie. So we have a extraordinarily large presentation team joining me tonight. So we'll have 7 up here with me, representative of the broad scope of a project. So Greg, I think you'll be here, and everyone else can fill in.
Maybe I'll let these things for you guys and us together. Yeah, okay.
Yep. Okay.
Do you want to introduce the team.
I will be. So thank you, Dottie, and for everyone here. We are really excited to be here to provide an update on the town's ongoing feasibility phase planning for the replacement of our police, fire, and DPW facilities in town. The goal is for tonight's presentation to be comprehensive, covering the origins of this project through various milestones along the way, which established why it's time to replace police, fire, and DPW in Easton, what the conditions that exist today are at those buildings to warrant such a decision, what team has been assembled to advance the project working with the Municipal Building Committee. The chair, Andy Williams, is here with us tonight. What our work to date has shown, and where we will be going in the next 6 weeks before the Municipal Building Committee picks a preferred alternative to enter into schematic. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you had a clicky. Before we enter into schematic design. So before I introduce the large team I have with me, who are going to go into much more detail on this project, I wanted to just give a quick overview and reminder of why this project. Our DPW, water, police, and fire facilities, particularly at Lothrop Street, range from 50 to more than 70 years old. They're antiquated and not up to a variety of accessibility, safety, and environmental codes. They are too small for the equipment and the personnel that they house, resulting in overcrowding of equipment and exposure to the elements of that equipment, confinement of personnel to crowded facilities with inadequate space to work safely. The facilities are past their useful lives, and continued annual capital spending on repairs is no longer a sound financial investment. Feasibility is the first step in ascertaining the appropriate and necessary replacement options available to the community in a proactive and responsible manner rather than reactive and emergency repair basis while these buildings further degrade and the community continues to grow. So while tonight represents a significant milestone for this project as we enter the final stage of feasibility leading into schematic design, it follows years of work stemming back at least to 2014 when the town engaged in a comprehensive facilities assessment study with Dorian Whittier, which ID'd more than $300 million in building repair and replacement needs across the town and schools. This study itself was one of the predicates that led to the MSBA process that invited Center School in and has resulted in the very soon to be complete Blanche Ames Elementary School. In 2019, the Municipal Building Committee, working with the Director of Public Works, Dave Field, updated that already extremely large repair number to 2019 figures and concluded that it was time to replace police, fire, and DPW. As we just heard with the Affordable Housing Trust, COVID threw a wrench in that, paused that effort for a couple of years, but then in 2021, we began picking the ball back up on this project in earnest again. Went to town meeting last fall in November, seeking $500,000 in feasibility funds, which was approved, and we have been working on that to bring us here tonight. So following tonight's update, we plan to spend September engaging the community by hosting building tours, public meetings in person and on Zoom, and going to civic events and fall festivals to raise awareness about the project in advance of the anticipated October 4th vote of the Municipal Building Committee to pick a preferred alternative to advance to the schematic design phase. Given the enormous scope of this project, we have assembled a multidisciplinary team working with the Municipal Building Committee and the Select Board, represented here tonight by Director Field, Chief Boone, Deputy John Carroll, as well as Walter Hartley and Chris Loeffler of PMA, who are our owner's project manager, and designers Greg Joint from Castle Booze Associates and Brian McCusker of Weston and Sampson. As we touch on each department, you will hear from our design experts regarding the current deficiencies and challenges at each of these facilities, and then each department head will kind of talk about what that means day to day for an impact on their personnel and our ability to serve the public. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Walter, our owner's project manager, to take us through the next portion of our update.
Thank you, Connor. Good evening, Select Board. Just Connor did a great job kind of prefacing everything that's happened to date. So I'm going to take you looking forward to the next year and a half. So we've been in our feasibility study. There are 2 really deliverables at that point, and we're really following that MSBA model that you heard so much about that really led us to that great solution of the Blanche Ames project, the preliminary design program, and then what you heard Connor speaking about, the preferred schematic report. To get to that preferred schematic report, and the culmination of that does end in that final solution. And as Connor mentioned, on October 6th, we are going to be looking for the Municipal Building Committee to make a selection of one of the 3 alternatives you'll see in the presentation coming up. There's been a lot of background work, but looking forward, what would occur in schematic design is very similar to the Blanche Ames project. Interior, exterior design, so today you won't see any exterior, interior design of a project, but really just the solutions that are going to be able to solve the problem that exists in Easton. Detailed room layouts, finalizing the project scope, and establishing a project budget, which of course will be everyone's initial question. I can get that out of the way now. We do not have estimates currently. Those will be going to the estimators for conceptual estimates in the next day or so. They will be reviewed with the Municipal Building Committee at that October 4th meeting. Where that decision will be made. Once the schematic design is selected, we'd be looking for an April to August district approval and vote. We're targeting right now a June of 2023 vote for funding for that type of project. At that point in time, the scope would be locked in for that project. The budget would be locked in, and we'd be able to present that information for the price, inclusive of the tax impact, local impact to anything in the town as well. Really very, very similar to the process that was done at Blanche Ames. Pending a successful vote at that point in time, we'd move to a year and a couple months of design, detailed design. So we go through 3 stages at that point in time with estimates at each one of the phases that include a detailed design estimate, a 60% construction document estimate, a 90% construction document estimate, which will be followed by bidding at that point in time. So that really takes you all right up to the end of beginning of construction for that timeline. So highlighting those key dates within the feasibility and the schematic design. July 2022, the MBC made those recommendations for further study. September 22, cost analysis is going to be ongoing. We're going to get to that a little bit earlier in the next few days, getting that over to the estimators. And then in October 2022, Municipal Building Committee vote to approve that preferred solution. The key dates in the schematic design are going to be early February 2023, schematic design estimating, March, Municipal Building Committee approval of that schematic design scope and budget. So we'll work to get everything within the budget that we can get in and hit those numbers. And then the June 2023 local funding authorization. Turn it over to Greg for his update.
Thank you all. And so as part of this process, we took a long time looking at your existing conditions in your existing locations to have a deep understanding of what you're dealing with currently and able to make our recommendations for how to move forward with a project. So, this was I don't want to say town-wide, but pretty close to a town-wide study of a number of different facilities that we'll talk about. And we'll start with the DPW. Brian will take that for the DPW and talk about DPW facilities and their current conditions.
Yeah, so good evening, I'm Brian from Weston and Sampson. So the Public Works currently has a few different sites, and they have the Easton Wood Shop, which is located at the town pool. They have their main DPW headquarters at 130 Center Street, and then the Water Division is next to the Fire Department on Bay Road. It's needs to be consolidated. It's not very efficient layout currently. It's just very difficult for the personnel to kind of work with each other. It kind of makes an inefficient operations. Next slide. So one of the main conditions at the main headquarters at 130 Center Street, excuse me, is the latest addition was built in 1972. That is over 50 years ago. The original part of the building was built in the 50s. It is crumbling, and these buildings cannot be salvaged for the new scope of what the DPW needs. So we have gone gone through, done the existing conditions, and right now one of the other issues is they have to store equipment outside, as you can see in that bottom left photo. This is a very expensive fleet that the DPW maintains. So some of the replacements needed, consolidation of the departments and divisions, immediate need for updated facilities and technology, and then storing the fleet indoors. Further on, we will get to some of the cost benefits to that. Do you want to talk any deficiencies?
Yeah, so the big thing with our deficiencies, it's not environmentally safe. We are not up to environmental regulations, and we're not safe for the workers and anyone who visits the DPW. We don't meet any health and safety regulations, and so that's my biggest concern, is that this building isn't serving the residents.
And now we're onto the salt storage shed. This is its own thing. It's obviously not a super important building, but at the same time, you store your salt in here, and everybody during the winter wants assalted roads, first, right? They also have brine tanks to the right. There's a few other on the site that aren't in this photo. Right now, this currently can't handle all the salt, so you have to kind of maintain your deliveries, and sometimes the deliveries are difficult during emergency responses. So, any more on that?
Yeah, it's not ideal to not be able to store your full winter's need. We do order as soon as we replenish, but in 2015, we saw the back of the shed, and it was very nerve-wracking for everyone because we basically were out of salt, and you couldn't get it from any supplier. So having a bigger shed would help us, bridge that need.
We get that question just about every time we have a big snowstorm. One year, we couldn't get the salt, and
Exactly.
we had to get it from 2 different contractors, and people were saying, why don't you just stock up on more salt? That's why.
That's why we're busting at the seams. We put more in there than we probably should. The walls are bowing. Again, the whole facility is dated. It's served us for 70 years, but it's not going to for much longer.
And once again, here's the outdoor vehicle storage. As you can see, that dump truck cannot fit under this. You see this all the time with modern day vehicles not fitting in, older buildings. This is a very expensive fleet, and then as we get further in, we'll actually show more on this, but it's also dangerous for the employees during inclement weather events, right? You have to clear the vehicles, you have to get up on there, it's slippery, they're tall. And then it's also not the best practice if there are leaks and spills, which a lot of vehicles do. So if they're indoors, you can contain it, you can treat it, and then send it out to sewer.
To be clear, there's no containment and treatment here.
Zero.
Right.
Zero.
So you have an issue of oil, fuel.
Yep. So in one example too, even the vehicles that come inside to be worked on, we have no active floor drains in the facility. It was designed for floor drains. They were capped many years ago due to other environmental regulations. So we have melting snow and hydraulic oil that's leaking out of broken lines as we're repairing them, and it pools and puddles up to a couple inches of depth during a snowstorm in the garage at various locations. Not a safe situation, and that's kind of contained, but any other leaks outside aren't contained, and the site slopes down to wetlands.
And then here's we're talking about the fleet. One of the things with the vehicles is you can get approximately 3 years on the life of the vehicle if they're stored indoors and washed appropriately, which is the APWA best practice, the American Public Works Associations. A couple things is you have less vehicle idling, you have faster responses, less employee injuries, quieter for neighbors. You have to run these things for, some time in the winter when you're responding to an inclement event. We'll get further in on that with the sites. Some of the sites for DPWs aren't abutting neighbors, so that's better. Currently at 130 Center Street they do. One of the things too with the vehicles you can see here is the main issue with these vehicles is they rot out. The engines don't seize or die. It's the undercarriage rot.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons you have to turn them over.
One of the big deficiencies we have for the entire town, we do not have a vehicle wash. So that really limits what we can do to keep down the corrosion. We rinse off our vehicles during the winter. We rinse off with just pure water to remove salt, but we can't do that if temperatures are below zero. So there's could be weeks on end where these trucks cannot be cleaned. There's residue all over them, and actually salt chunks and cakes all in our conveyor belts, all under the chassis, and that's leading to what you see on those pictures.
Dave, do you know off the top of your head roughly what's the value of our fleet, including police and fire, that we don't have a wash for?
I don't have the police and fire number. The DPW number is around 9 million.
Okay.
9 million?
This is the replacement cost of our fleet, and that number is a little dated, so I'll probably have to update that to get a more accurate picture. And then the police and fire, I'm not sure if you know your numbers.
One fire
offhand.
truck's $1 million, so
exactly.
It adds up quick.
Oh, and here's the water division. That's part of the DPW as well. They are on their own site. This building is not accessible. As we know, it's on Bay Road next to the existing fire station. You know, it was a school turned water division. In the back, they also have a little bit of a yard. You can see that in the Google Earth 3D view. They store stuff. So there's a few multiple locations where the DPW is storing materials needed for emergencies. And the water department as well does need to respond to some emergencies when pipes break, and sometimes their material is not adequately stored, and that becomes an issue as well. And then the building is located on Center Street as well. I'll turn it back to Greg for the public seat.
Thanks, Brian. And I think you'll see kind of some recurring themes here around your building ages. These buildings were built before ADA was adopted, so accessibility is an issue at almost all of the facilities. Something that you're exempt from until you start renovating them. As you start to engage in upgrades or renovations, it would start to trigger that code-related requirement. I would say the same goes for fire protective systems. So most of these buildings are not sprinklered. When you go to upgrade a building, in a case where you want to renovate it, you're required to go in and provide those systems in that system. So as we look at the buildings, these are all things that we take into consideration. In addition to those structural upgrades, when you're modifying a building heavily to meet current needs, structural upgrades become required if you're not exempted for a historic preservation or some other reason. So as we start to evaluate the buildings, something that may look nice or in reasonable shape really has a different context when you start to look into the code upgrades required by heavy modification of the building to meet current codes. So we'll go through public safety, existing police facilities on Mothra Street. This is the newer portion of the building. Still an out-of-date facility and really isn't conducive to modern day police work. It was renovated 30 years ago, so most of those items have reached the end of their useful life. And replacement is needed on a lot of the individual items, windows, doors, mechanical systems, things like that. The fire side of this building also, we'll get to in a little bit, but has asbestos in it, so abating the facility would be part of any renovation. So as we look to what the building does operationally, we look first at kind of what the storage limits are, kind of how things are overlapping, and I think Chief Boone can talk a bit about how individual pieces of their operation overlap in certain areas that really isn't conducive to their day-to-day operations.
Mm-hmm. Do you want me to start with? Right here, what you're looking at is really our garage, our generator, and our large storage property. So what ends up happening if we have to take possession of a vehicle for example, a bad car accident, so to speak, and we have to maintain that vehicle to be processed, that goes in that garage. What the way this photo is taken is we're standing in the bay. So that essentially closes down that garage. It could be several months until the vehicle gets processed. So we've now really sealed off that entire part of the building, and we ended up adding a video camera to this just to preserve the integrity of that area. We are an accredited police department, which I'm very proud of. We're actually coming up on our assessment in a few months. This will be our 5th time, but I have to get waivers because we have no fire suppression. Other than that fire extinguisher you see in the corner, we have no sprinkler system to protect anything that may happen. If you could flip the next slide, I know that there is, on the left, a little blurry, but that's our property and evidence room. We have evidence that we may have to hold on to forever. And there is things in there dating back to the 1960s that we'll never be able to get rid of, we'll never be able to purge, just we have to hold on to them for the sensitive nature of what the items are. So we've now outgrown our property room. So it's as organized as it can be, but in a few months when we have our assessment, we have to bring them into that property room. And one of the notes we're going to get about best practices is to reassign property to different shelves. We just don't have the areas to add shelves. What you're seeing on the right is the chief's conference room, and that is our overstock for PPE. We didn't have anything other than really a janitor's closet to maintain our first aid, so we were housing everything in that conference room for the better part of 2 years, where Chief Sullivan and I were the only people that could get in there and ration out our supplies. So that effectively made that conference room completely off limits, and it limited any community meetings we could have or any staff meetings, so we really had nowhere to go but to ask the DPW if we could borrow their room, reserve a room at Town Hall. We weren't able to do anything really out of the police station just because of that fact alone. So what you're seeing on the left is the central records location of the police department. That's the back of the building, and if anyone's taken a tour, you'll understand what that is. We are scheduling a tour coming up, so I encourage everyone to come. That really is the, prior to 1991, everything was paper. The daily logs, the police reports, everything was paper, and we're required to keep most of that. We have a retention schedule. Some can be purged after 20 years. But what you see there is we're going to be holding on to forever. And again, fire suppression systems, if we ever had an issue in that building, we could essentially be destroying all those records that, a lot of those date back to the 1930s. So we have to preserve those. We can't scan and destroy. I've asked the supervisor of records if we're to do that. There are some things we can, but we are required to keep the original copy of a lot of those documents. So they're coming with us regardless of wherever we go.
And to be clear, that's a hallway.
And that's a hallway. So the picture doesn't do it justice. What you're seeing on the right is our training and our roll call room. It's really set up for a maximum of 12 people, but if anyone's ever been in there, it's a lot having 12 people in there. We typically run 6 officers per shift. We have to have at least 4 working, but so it's crowded just doing day-to-day operations in there. It's that really is the hub of the police department. If we're ever having a sensitive conversation with a resident or there's a victim of a crime, everything is taking place right there, so there's no real confidentiality, and it doesn't make for open dialogue with potentially a victim or a resident that wants to talk to us about a concern. We could be processing a detainee, and they have to walk right by the officers doing their police reports. There's really nowhere else to go in the building. We've truly outgrown it in that sense.
Yeah, so I'd say, Chief, the biggest thing we've noticed in terms of space is that most things are along a path of travel. So as you were talking about, as you're releasing detainees from the detention area, they may be walking through where the officer that arrested them wrote the report and by their desks, which really isn't a best practice. And when we talk about de-escalating situations and getting people released quickly, making sure they have a clear path to exit to be picked up and to not interact more than necessary with maybe an arresting officer is really the best practice and what we would typically do in a normal facility. The department just doesn't have that opportunity here.
Correct. And just on that room on the right, our training room, we used to host domestic violence meetings in there. We would have our hugs group would be in there, and we would have to literally ask them to leave to go into the lobby while we were processing people because there was no way to secure that area. So it became really inconvenient. We stopped having the meetings there. They ended up having them elsewhere. But so it really limits what we can offer to the community. One thing that we try to use is a shared spot with the DPW with an EOC. We couldn't run an EOC out of the police station. It would have to be done through the DPW. So it really limits a lot of opportunities for the community to come in and actually be part of the police department during some of these things. So.
And so now we'll jump over to the fire side of things. We'll do the stations in order, just to make it a little bit easier. Station 1, so same building on the other side of the wall. This is where the kind of mechanical equipment is housed in that building. Look, everything's working currently, but things are aging out. The town has maintained and replaced certain pieces of equipment as they've needed to, but nothing in this building is I'd say, new. Nothing is within the last 10 years, probably. I think the hot water heaters are probably the newest thing in there. The building has a number of issues that we talked about on the police side. I would say those are kind of amplified on the fire side because this is the older portion of the building. Primarily, the building just was not built for the apparatus of today and the fire operations of today. The department has made it work for many years, but could be doing better in a more updated facility with a bit more room, and the deputy chief is here to talk a bit about the impacts of the building on their day-to-day operations. So, Deputy Chief, I'll throw to you and let you talk about the apparatus bay.
Glad that picture got blown up. So obviously space is a big concern of ours. Every one of our single bays has either 2 or more pieces of equipment in it. This particular bay has 2 ambulances and our Kubota, which is housed on a trailer, stored on a trailer. One of the biggest response readiness issues with this truck is in order to actually, after a call when they clear the hospital, to become response ready and decon the stretcher, the truck actually has to be outside. You can't pull the stretcher out because of the trailer that's behind the ambulance, so it creates a delay in becoming response ready for the constituents of the town. That's one of our biggest issues with the building is just space. Equipment is gone. We've gotten more equipment, luckily. Our trucks have also gotten bigger, and because we've gotten busier call volume wise, we're no longer retiring trucks. So we have 4 ambulance now, 2 frontline, 2 spare, which we utilize quite frequently. So we're able to keep an ambulance in service instead of diverting to another town. So I think that is the biggest highlight of this photo is just that truck needs to be outside of the station to actually become response ready after a call.
So obviously, when the weather's nice, that's not as much of a problem, but in inclement weather, that really takes a toll on the operations, getting that truck back ready to go out onto a response. And so that's on the response time, and we'll talk a little bit about the training. As you probably know, fire is constantly training their staff during the day, and I'll let Deputy Chief talk a little bit about kind of the old hose tower, which is used for a lot of training.
Yes, exactly. These pictures actually kind of depict it well. It's like the evolution of the hose tower in the fire service. So the picture on the right, at the very top, you can see little metal poles that stick out. So we'd actually hang our fire hose on there after a fire to dry the hose, but fabrics and technology have improved enough that we just pack it back on the truck now. We no longer need to dry the hose. So the tower then evolved into a training platform. Unfortunately, that tower is too tight to throw one of our ground ladders, so we'd utilize there's a ladder on the left of that picture that's enclosed. It's a wall ladder that goes straight up. So it got us up there, but we weren't allowed to reinforce that muscle memory of throwing the ground ladder and really reinforcing our basic principles of firefighting. And the top would actually use to rappel off and do like tech rescue drills off the top of it. And it has since just failed. It's no longer safe. So like most spaces in all of the buildings we have, any extra nook and cranny defaults to storage. So it went from being a hose tower to a training facility, and now it is storage for us. But ideally, in a new facility, there's multiple platforms that you can actually put a ladder to, our ground ladders to, different anchor points, like actual certified anchor points that we can rappel off of and get some really good training in instead of kind of the makeshift that we had to do in the past. So.
And I think, so what we would look to design in the future would be like Deputy Chief said, a post tower that's geared toward training that allows for the training to happen safely with multiple kind of progressions of that training. So you start at a more simple, lower height in the training revolutions, and as the trainee gets more comfortable, they move up and get more comfortable rappelling or things like that that aren't maybe a first year kind of thing that they would do, but are able to practice a number of different bailouts, ladder revolutions in a safe manner. And just to talk a little bit about space, obviously the space for all of these departments is deficient, and so what that leads to is kind of dual role spaces. So here you can see that their exercise equipment is housed with their SCBA fill station. So what they use to fill the packs with breathable air for their fire responses is in their physical training room. It's not the best practice. We like to see those things separated so that if there is an accident with that equipment, it's filling pressure vessels under high pressure. It's contained within there. They have modern equipment that really mitigates that risk a lot, but having it in a separate defined space for that, sealed off from the rest of the operations, is an important thing. So we'll jump to Station 2. So Station 2, Depot Street, was recently renovated and is serving the department pretty well. But there are a number of deficiencies here that we would expect to see differently in a modern firefighting facility. So the biggest two I'll point out is just one, the lack of space, and two, the lack of decontamination and storage of the turnout gear. We'll touch on this a little bit more in a couple slides, but those are the things that we would expect to see in a modern facility that just aren't here. Again, building was beautifully renovated. It's about half a mile from my house. I drive by it every day, but it just isn't really viable for a 50-year solution for the fire department. So you can see there's kind of a limited amount of space on that parcel. It's a very small parcel. It was a 1930s era building, and so what that leads to is a small apparatus bay and turnout gear, which you can see here on the wall, being stored out in the bays for the entire station here. So we would look to see that in a more defined room that was under negative pressure, so that those contaminants don't get out into the rest of the station. So we'll talk a bit more about that a little later, and we'll jump to Station 3. So Station 3 is where administration is currently. They're kind of have built a number of administrative offices out in the building to go from what was, I think, originally a call department or a volunteer department to a professional department over time. So the building has evolved with the department, but is still a little bit small for their current operations. But this is the most recent building, and it's a 1980s era building. With that age, things have started to reach the end of their useful life. Fenestration systems, windows, doors, roofing systems, mechanical systems have all kind of started to age out and are ready to be replaced. Nothing's at the point of failure yet, but as we look to solve the department needs for the foreseeable future, those are things that were identified in the 2014 report that haven't really been addressed to this point, and continue to be an ongoing issue for the department, and will become more of an issue in the not too distant future.
Great. If you may, it might be important to note too, along with administration, there's two full-time or 24-hour, 24/7, 365 coverage. There's two firefighter staff there. Our mechanic are also out of there. Our CERT team is out of there. All their supplies, their rehab buses in that station, and we also house a hazmat truck. So it is filled to the gills, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and it's the same with all the stations, where they are really filled with the equipment that the town needs to operate on a day-to-day basis. I think you have a couple of backup engines stored out in the parking lot at this time, from time to time, an extra surplus, I think. So those things would be better off served indoors with the DPW equipment, and the same goes for the fire equipment. That lack of a wash facility, does impact the lifespan of those engines and other apparatus. Like we said, issues with space. The biggest issue space-wise for the line firefighters here is really the lack of adequate female facilities. The demographic of the fire service is starting to change and will inevitably change in the future. So making sure the department is prepared for that is an important thing. They're making it work now, but as that demographic starts to change, we'll see a lot more need for facilities for female firefighters.
I was waiting for you to say that through all of these slides, because even with the DPW and police, that's really important. And we've been really working hard to try to diversify all of our departments by gender. And I think, we're making some headway on that, but it's certainly more inviting when there are appropriate facilities.
And I want to say that the departments are doing their best with what they have to make accommodations, but being set up for success in that way is a much different thing than making things work. Just a little talk about Firefighter Health and decontamination and laundry and storage of turnout gear. So Firefighter Health has become a pretty big topic in the fire service, I'd say in the last 10 years, even more so within the last 5 years. Cancer is the leading cause of death of line, active duty firefighters by a staggering amount. I think it's 66% of active duty deaths are caused by cancer and 14% are due to heart attacks. So that kind of gives you an idea of the issue. It's a big focus, and Easton currently doesn't have any decontamination facilities. So we'll talk a little bit about what one of those would look like in the next slide, but the department is doing the very best they can. I think, Deputy, if you want to just run through how you decontaminate now, and we can talk about how you might want to do it in the future.
And actually, just for the non-first responders in the room, why it's so important that there's appropriate decontamination for folks coming in.
So it all ends with not bringing the contamination home. So it really starts at the fire scene. So there's all kinds of harmful and toxic gases that come from smoke, and naturally when you're inside a house fighting a fire, that gets absorbed into your gear. But we've also found that it gets absorbed into your skin. No matter how much you put on, it still gets in. So we do a gross decontamination on the fire scene. They actually, when you're done, they spray you off with a fire hose and rinse off all the heavy contaminants. And then back at the firehouse is kind of where we're lacking. We don't have the ability to shower and get the contaminants off of us before we go into our living space. So we have to enter our living space with everything on us in order to shower and properly decontaminate. But we're behind the 8 ball, because we're supposed to do that initial shower outside with our gear completely separate of our living space before we even get inside. We can't do that. Another area, you see the gear racks. They're open gear racks inside the garage. We're supposed to have a negative pressure room with where our turnout gear is. So there's no. It's a two-way contamination. So we wash our gear to get all the contaminants off, but then we have to protect our gear. So if it's hanging in the garage and a truck pulls in, it's absorbing that truck exhaust. It's getting more carcinogens on it. Whereas if it's in what they do now, a proper room, it's sealed off. It doesn't have the ability to get that carcinogens on it, and you actually have a clean set of gear when you're going to a call. So it's kind of a twofold. I believe we have a picture coming up that depicts it pretty well. But we are, like I said, we're doing the best with what we have. The gear extractors are night and day from what we had even 10 years ago, and as far as getting the carcinogens out of our gear. But it's keeping it out when it's sitting in the station, and having the ability to shower off and get the contaminants off us before we go into our living space is a huge hurdle that we need to face.
Yeah, and so, talking about what that could potentially or should really look like, kind of walk you through, a truck pulls back into the apparatus bay, firefighters would get out after after having that gross decontamination, and they would go directly into a decon room. So that decon room, it has a large, kind of drench shower, has some sinks in order to take their gear off, start to wash that stuff down. They're able to wash down some equipment, stretcher boards, backboards, things like that in that room as well, to make sure those get back into service quickly. And then you go directly into the laundry room. So they're taking their turnout gear from the decon into the laundry room where it gets laundered, washer extractors to get that turnout gear cleaned, firefighters' safety equipment cleaned, as well as all of their breathing apparatus cleaned, stored, and then back into service. So doing that quickly and making sure that doesn't continue with them into the station is important. That connection through over to the turnout gear storage area where off-duty turnout gear is stored, so people who are on shift would have their gear stored here. That room is designed in negative pressure so that contaminants from in there aren't getting out and sealed off from the apparatus bay, so contaminant from the truck isn't getting into the turnout gear and resoiling it. For the firefighter, he would continue on to showering, so now you're going to get into an actual shower that you can clean yourself before you go back into the bunk and day room area of the station, making sure that area stays as clean as possible when the firefighters are coming back from an incident. The numbers kind of speak for themselves in terms of cancer diagnosis is for firefighters 9% more than the general population for diagnoses, and 14% more in related deaths. So, the firefighting service will never be a safe job, I'd say, but our intent is to minimize that risk as much as possible and make sure that the things get cleaned up as effectively as possible. I would say that this is an ongoing area of research and evolution. So as those improvements and standards are made, we get them incorporated into our designs as quickly as possible. So, Dan, the sound's not working. Nope. So,
can you start that slide again?
Yep, I think so. We'll just try again. Is it?
I think it's just on. You just got to turn it up.
Sorry.
Just the TV or the computer?
Dave,
Unless it turned off. I don't know if it
might
timed
have
out.
timed out. Sorry, I think our sound. Yeah,
timed out.
Our sound bar is energy saving.
We practiced.
So one of our challenges is that the way our three-station system runs, we have 4 or 5 firefighters at Lockwood Street Station 1 staffing an ambulance, an engine, or a ladder truck 24/7, 365. And at Depot Street, or Station 2, we have 2 firefighters who staff an engine 24/7, 365. So the coverage is always available out of those stations. The challenge we have is that the Foundry Street North Mansfield side of Easton has gotten much busier, and our Bay Road station is staffed with 2 firefighters, but they have to choose between taking the ambulance or the fire engine to cover that side of town. So when the ambulance is out, which it is many, many hours a day, taking care of our residents, that leaves that side of town without a permanently staffed fire engine. So that's a challenge for us, that when we have a call on that side of town and the ambulance is already out, we have to bring resources in from further away to manage the situation. Our staff does a great job at handling it, but we're exploring our options on how we can maybe do that better in the future.
And so I think, Chief is alluding to the current staffing and the locations of which the stations are. As we talked about a little bit earlier, the stations were developed in a model of firefighting that was a volunteer basis, and obviously the fire service has evolved, and as we're looking to the next 50 years of service for the town, I think it's important that we understand all of the challenges, not just building, but operational, so that we present solutions that are effective for those next 50 years of service. So we'll go a bit through kind of the initial programming. So that was the existing conditions part of the study, and now we'll talk about the programming, so the forward-looking piece of what kind of the future holds for the departments and what their needs really are. Just a note on the fire service and what our study includes. So a fire response time study is part of our scope in this project. So what that does is it's an analysis of your existing response time data to make us understand what your response times are for incidents for the fire service, how you're responding to things, and where any inefficiencies are or where room for improvement could come. And then it looks forward for the potential solutions. So we take the solutions that will be presented, and we look at those solely in terms of fire response and what that does to the fire response for the department throughout the town. So the response study is ongoing. We expect results within a week or so, and that will be part of the evaluation of options as we go through that with the Municipal Building Committee. The outcomes really for the town are reliable data on response time. So data you can count on that is objective and based in the facts of what you have been currently doing, and modern fire planning by a consultant that specializes in this and does this throughout the country. And it will come with a recommendation for potential site selection. So our consultant will recommend actions that may be taken with potential sites, what their benefits and challenges are, so that not only can they be understood by the community as these decisions are made, but can help the department and to understand what in ways in which they may need to operate in the future. Going into the master programming, kind of how much space everybody needs. We looked at the program from separate facilities, and ultimately those will be modified slightly as we go through the options and facilities start to combine together. So for police, one facility at about 32,000 square feet. For fire, one new facility at about 39,000 square feet versus and potentially a renovated facility or a new substation, between say 8,000 and 12,000 square feet, and public works. So a new public works facility, and we think that's about 60,000 square feet. Just as a reference, if you were to house every single piece of equipment indoors for public works, you would be up around 75,000 square feet. So some potential solutions to kind of limit square footage, but still keep the majority of your fleet inside will be for some covered canopies and things like that for equipment that's not as temperature sensitive, I'd say. So fixed equipment that's not running. You have a multi-million-dollar fleet, obviously, that we talked about, and it needs to be undercover, and a vehicle wash to protect and lengthen the service life is part of the program, and which other departments in the town will obviously use, so it won't be a solely DPW-related function.
Can I just ask one question about that, the size? Wouldn't it make more sense to go with the 75,000 square feet, anticipating that you may end up with larger vehicles and more need to do what, securing vehicles, et cetera?
Yeah, so I will throw to Brian, but we've thought about that, and I think the smaller square footage does account for growth and the size of vehicle changes. I'll let you take the answer, but
yeah. So sometimes when we do the analysis of the fleet in the covered storage, some of the trucks are take home, some of them aren't as temperature sensitive. Yes, the 75,000 gross square foot would probably be the best solution, but we do want to be sensitive to the price and make sure that, you know, this actually does get built versus kind of the sticker shock. You know, a lot of times when we build a salt shed, there's always canopies off that as well, which, you know, equipment's stored under. So there are kind of multiple outbuildings that are kind of associated with this as well. But the 59,000 square feet is pretty much the administration, the employee facilities, the vehicle maintenance, which also includes the fire department maintenance as well, which is kind of a new item in Easton, or newer. And then, you know, the regular storage, which, you know, eventually I think, you know, you will be able to see the floor plan and all the vehicles listed with the tags. So I think.
Thank you.
we'll
I
get
think
down
that's a
that
great question, though, because one of the things, you know, when on the school planning committee, envisioning that school's gonna need to last 50 to 75 years. We don't even have any comprehension of what that's gonna look like then. So it's a real challenge to figure out things like, you know, capacity or use over that period of time. You don't wanna be penny wise and pound foolish, and then 20 years down the road, they'll be saying, why didn't they think of, you know, about this or that? So I appreciate that question, Craig.
And so, you know, as we do that, you know, the kind of three-legged stool is the program, looking at the existing facilities, and then looking at potential new sites. And so as part of the study, we're going to look at 3 options for further study that we'll talk about in a second. And so let's talk a little bit about potential sites for the future. So in addition to all of the existing sites, we looked at 3 potential sites for further development. So the first being Daly's Corner. So this is a portion of the Stonehill property across from Hilliard's, you know, on Washington and Maine. The second is the Center School site. So obviously with the Blanche James opening, the Center School site becomes available. And the third is the Gill property. So we'll go quickly through those 3 properties. I'll let Brian from Weston & Sampson give a little overview of those properties. Brian?
Yeah, and you know, at Weston & Sampson, we're also the civil engineering team and the environmental team for this project as well. So right here at Daly Corner, you can kind of see that yellow outline is the buildable lot with the offsets from the wetlands and the intermittent stream that actually occurs on the other side of Washington Street. So the thought process here was to be able to put a fire substation or possible other buildings here, as you know, Greg will show later. But you have the potential development of 8 acres. Now that's not a lot for public safety, DPW, and you know, a fire station. But you know, you might be able to put an outlier here. Some of the challenges we have, it's not town-owned currently. There are a lot of wetlands that are kind of making a oddly shaped site, and then there is no sewer connection. So you would have to put a septic on this. Here at Center School, as we know, it's getting closed, and it's currently town-owned. It's a great central location, previously developed. Once again, the potential development area is kind of low for multiple buildings on the site, 7.5 acres. You know, some of the challenges you're gonna have to deal with is you're gonna have to demolish the existing building. You have residential butters, which we all know doesn't really work for emergency operations sometimes. You have the wetlands out in the front and the back, and then that proximity to that new intersection that is under construction currently. No sewer connection as well. The Gill property, you know, the benefits to this was that it's town-owned. It was, you know, acquired a few years ago. It's a great central location. The sewer connection, which is ideal for the DPW. If not, you have to do a bunch of tight tanks and DEP regulations for the vehicle wash, which is expensive to maintain. Can be done, but is expensive. You know, limited abutters, as you can see. You have some commercial down Page South, and then the potential development was 10 acres, and that's, you know, as indicated in that general fund. So that yellow outline is within wetlands and buildable area at, I think, is that a little bit of?
About 19 acres.
19.
That are potentially buildable there. Obviously, CPA funds were used, so the development is limited to 10 acres. So we'll look at what that means for you know, potential use. Options for further study. The building committee last month looked at a number of options. I think it's 8 total, and was able to narrow it down to 3 potential options for further study, which is where we are now. So I will spare you all from running through every single option, but we've looked at pretty much every combination of combining sites feasible within these existing sites and the 3 new potential sites. Ultimately, the building committee has narrowed that down to option 1, which is a new public safety building at Daly Corner, a new DPW at Gill property, and renovations of the Bay Road Fire Station number 3 into a substation. Option 3B, which is a new police facility at Gill property, a new DPW facility at Gill property, a new fire headquarters, so fire only, at Daly Corner, and renovations of that of that Station 3 into a substation on Bay Road. And then option 5B, which the committee took the ability to make their own in the building committee meeting, which was great. So that is a new police and fire combined at Gill property with a DPW also at that site, and then a new substation at Daly Corner. So fire headquarters would be on Gill property with all the other departments, and Gill Corner would become a substation for coverage.
Just before we move on, I want to just note, following closely, you'll notice that the existing DPW on Center and the existing police, fire, and Lothrop are not among these options for redevelopment. I think it's really important to just address that the challenges that were identified at 2 of these, namely wetlands and no sewer, are true at those, except on significantly smaller portions that are surrounded in a residential area. Less acreage, similar challenges, and so those were considered. It was a really good
phasing.
Oh yeah, so that a huge part. Yeah. It was phasing as well. If you were trying to redevelop on an existing site where staff is occupying, you would need to have phasing of the construction. It's very difficult to run 24/7 operations out of a phased construction project. But I just wanted to know that was reviewed. Municipal Building Committee had a really good conversation about a lot of those options, and that's really one of the items about Daly's Corner and Gill that's really advantageous is there's no residential abutters, and although 8.5 to 10 acres is not necessarily as much as you would like to have it be as easy as possible to develop, it's significantly larger than I think 2 acres, which is what we're working with. So just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And you can see option 6, the redevelopment of the DPW was considered, but ultimately there are just better options that could be pursued and allows the town to do other things that may be more appropriate with those parcels.
Another question, I'm sorry. The Gill property could potentially have access to the sewer, but Daly does not.
Correct.
And with the Daly property, there is the issue of wetlands surrounding that piece of property.
Yes, I mean, this is Easton, so wetlands are essentially a challenge on every piece of land that's not already built on, but yes.
Yeah, and I think, and you'll see a little bit of this in the options that we'll present tonight. These are things that are manageable. It's just a matter of what becomes more advantageous for the town based on the existing conditions that are there and how we can respond to them. So, option 1, for example, this is with the public safety building on the Daly Corner site. So relatively large building. We talked about the square footages. We would expect when those facilities are combined, so police and fire are combined, we'd have a square footage savings of about 10 to 15% on their, if they were individually, sited, because you get a little bit of overlap in some shared things like a community or large meeting room, lobby, mechanical equipment, things like that get to be combined. So you get a little bit of a better bang for your buck on those options. So those are some of the things we look at as we go through these 3 options. So, the advantages of this option are that police and fire are essentially, are located together at Daly. The Daly Corner site, even though it has the wetlands, has minimal flood hazard, so that, isn't really an option at the 500-year floodplain level, so we're not concerned about those wetlands kind of coming up into the site. And it consolidates kind of 2 fire stations into 1 fire station to kind of allow for better staffing to address that challenge that the chief was talking about. The challenges, however, are, there is a procurement issue with the land, obviously. I think Connor will talk about that a little later on. But Daly's Corner is less centralized for the police department. So, although it's site-wise okay, it's not the best for the police operations. Response is kind of centrally located, less than some other options. So DPW and public safety are still separated in this option, which I think ultimately the department heads would like to be together on a single site if they could be. For their kind of administrative operations, I think, and especially for storm events.
Yeah, and vehicle maintenance and fueling.
Yeah. So that obviously isn't possible for everything, but as we look at this option, you can see kind of how crunched we are in with the public safety building here on that site. So kind of just to orient everybody. So one in the center is the apparatus base where the fire trucks come out, and we'll separate the kind of fire station bunk rooms and all the living quarters over to the left of the screen, and administration, police operations over to the right of the screen. You can see that one of the kind of the disadvantages is that police and personnel really only have one way in and out of this site, and that's just kind of because we're kind of pinned in by some of those wetland conditions. So public safety on Daly Corner. And we won't look at every single site for every single option in the respect for your time, but we'll try to give you a kind of overview of every one little pieces. So option 3B, so that is a new police and DPW at Gill property, and a new fire headquarters at Daly Corner, and renovating that substation. So just kind of where they are located on the map is helpful, especially for fire, right? We're trying to get fire apparatus and staff out to responses from the stations, whereas police are generally out on patrol and are responding from the road. And DPW gets centrally located, so a good option for DPW and police, and a positive for fire. They have a pretty good coverage of the town. Looking at option 5B, so we'll dive into the sites a little bit more on this one. So this is a new police and fire headquarters at Gill property, so a public safety building, and a fire substation at Daly Corner, along with a new DPW also at Gill property. So Gill property gets built out significantly in this option, and then Daly Corner gets less developed because we're doing a substation there, so no fire administration, no police. It's a lot smaller of a footprint. So kind of the nice things, the advantages to this are that the 3 departments are kind of using one site, allows them to, in storm events and other events, have a centralized response and administration of those events. It consolidates 2 of the fire stations into one, and it's a centralized location to the rest of the town. So a pretty good central location on that Gill Street property, and then covering kind of the outskirts of town with the Daly Corner property for fire. One of the challenges here, I think, and again, Connor will speak to this a little bit later, is the procurement of Daly Corner. Obviously, non-publicly owned land has a process in which the town has to go about getting either the ownership or the rights to develop that parcel. And just a bit about what Gill property may look like. So we're developing here 10 acres out of the 110 acres. So though it looks large here in comparison to the rest of the parcel, it's really a small portion. Public safety building up front, out on Depot Street, with a connection back to kind of the other developable large area of the site for DPW. So public safety, fire apparatus is number 1. Fire station bunks, again, on the other side of the building from the administration. Community training room, so that kind of shared large meeting room that we talked about in the front of the building that potentially could have some public uses. I think we heard Chief talk about their limit to training and meeting space, and we're at the Council on Aging.
We have meeting space problems.
So I think it's a town-wide issue that this project may be able to address in some way. Police patrol toward the back of the site, and police and fire administration likely on the second floor of the building above police patrol. So shared, centralized fueling station, so between the two kind of developed site areas, a place where centralized fueling would take place. That would be open throughout the day for fire, police, DPW, and other town vehicles to fuel and get back on the road quickly. And then in the back of the site, a public works area, and the administration, followed by the workshops, so things like the wood shop, your town electrician, and then vehicle maintenance, and at the end of the building, that vehicle knock down and wash, knock down to get heavy stuff off, wash to get the truck clean, and ultimately leading around the building to your storage area, so where the vehicles are gone, put into park and be ready for continued operations. It also has a large yard down on the south side of the site, which would contain the salt shed and also your material storage bunks for stone and I don't know what else you store, Dave, but sand.
A little bit of everything, yes.
A little bit of everything to make the roads go back to where they were supposed to be. And one added benefit of this is, we talked about those Community Preservation Act funds, and that the remainder of this parcel was for recreational use. So it's possible here that we could create a connection to that recreational use, trailhead, a parking area, things like that, making that site accessible where it really isn't right now. And we'll just jump to Daly Corner. So you can see Daly Corner, fire substation, so a much smaller footprint. We're at about 12,000 square feet here compared to 50-something thousand square feet. So again, fire apparatus, fire bunk in kind of their day area, and it would also have a septic system here, so plenty of room to develop those things on this site for this fire substation. And one thing I would point out, because it did come out amongst the group, is you're entering out onto Main Street, so a fire preemption would be necessary here, and I would say that would probably be the same at the other Gill property, but here that preemption could be tied into the existing light at the intersection in order to stop 3 directions of traffic and let the westbound lane of Main Street flow through. So the apparatus is coming out, kind of back past the turning lanes where traffic would get tied up. So the nice part about this is we're able to push that apparatus bay deck a little bit back compared to the public safety building, get them out beyond where the turning lanes are, and traffic would, may be kind of queued up to turn. So that stuff's all possible and would be addressed in any potential design for this site.
So just before we move on to the next slide, which is another video from Chief Alexander, who couldn't be here tonight, just addressing, so Daly's Corner, not town-owned. As part of this project, we would need to go through procurement. That's something that we would need to put before town meeting. We're opening a warrant tonight. We've been open with Stonehill and Versus True. They're open to this possibility. They see it as a value add in that area because they understand that public works and police have some impact based on where they're located, but for fire, it's an incredibly important decision where these stations are located. And on that note, those following along have surely picked up that the 3 alternatives that Municipal Building Committee has selected all contemplate a 2-station model for fire. The chief on an earlier slide identified some of the staffing challenges with our current 4 10-person groups that we staff. With the current 3-station model, I think your average person driving by a fire station doesn't assume there's 2 people in them, but for 2 out of 3 of them, that is the case. But we want to make sure that folks understand we're not contemplating a shift of this size lightly or flippantly. As we've touched on, there's already a station response time study. We'll be able to have good data for that thanks to SEMREC, the information that they collect for centralized 911, including for the neighboring communities that are in there. And we will make sure that that response study is informing any of the potential recommendations moving forward for schematic design, and we wouldn't be going into that phase with Municipal Building Committee unless and until that response study verifies the operational capacity for response to folks no matter where they live. I think although we're waiting on the final report, we've gotten a kind of preliminary bill of health from the consultant to indicate that this site and Gill can work, and we're going to get that detailed report. That'll be shared with the Municipal Building Committee and the community as part of our engagement calendar in September. But I wanted to just address that out of the gate. Similarly, you'll notice that talking about the existing kind of real estate that the town has, that Depot Street, which was recently renovated and is in good shape, isn't listed as a substation here. We want to be super clear. We're not suggesting closing or more specifically selling or getting rid of that site. It's a great site. And we would be exploring continued service for that within the fire family, perhaps for CERT. We just spoke about how at existing headquarters on Bay Road, we have CERT vehicles either taking up apparatus space that ought to be for fire EMS, or those vehicles are currently just unsheltered and not being utilized.
And so I think Connor's summed it up well, but hearing it for the person who's responsible, maybe.
One of the things we've been trying to do with this project is look at how the fire department can utilize its staff better. And by going to a two-station model, using data to locate 2 fire stations precisely in an area that would allow us to maximum efficiency for response, we would be able to spread our firefighters out in a more efficient way to provide a more quality response, more consistent response to all of our residents, north and south, in the Boundary Street area, which we struggle in the north of town, which has been built up, whether it's Stonehill College or in the center of town. By spreading our staff into a more efficient model through 2 stations, we'll be able to provide better service to all of our residents.
And so, Chief has spoken about this, and we're looking at all of these options with our consultant to ensure that the fire response is appropriate. And, as you can see by kind of where they're located on the map, that puts both stations on kind of heavily traveled roads that are at a higher rate of speed, and gets them kind of up and down, north and south, and east to west, a little bit faster than, say, Lothrop Street, where they're kind of have to be very careful coming through, kind of numerous stop signs, and heavily settled area. They're able to get out onto faster travel lanes, much wider streets where they have better vision, are able to travel at a higher rate of speed and get to any incident a little bit faster. So our consultant has been in town. The deputy chief was nice enough to take him on a full tour of town. I think it took a little while, and also visit all of the sites. So he not only has the technical background to do this kind of work, he's been here kind of boots on the ground to make sure that he understands the conditions in the field and any kind of anomalies that are here in Easton, downtown, other things that may inhibit your understanding of the data just on a data level. Just in talking a little bit about kind of what the future may look like, we just wanted to show, we didn't have any fancy renderings or anything, but to show a little bit about what modern facilities of this type look like. I'll throw this to Brian, since most of them are his.
Yeah. So we all know Mansfield, your neighbor next door. We actually teamed up with Kessel Booth as well back in 2016 and designed and built that. This is in the back of the site. The public safety is in the front where the DPW was. To the right, you can see Grafton. That's not too far away. We tried to pick similar size DPWs that you would expect here. So yeah, Grafton was a brand new site. We clear cut that, and then what's nice about it is you have the fueling operations, which not the whole town uses, but still it would be very similar to what Easton has. You can see the salt shed way in the back. It's a very good yard. If you're driving down the Mass Pike, you can actually see it. Down in the bottom left, that's Holden, currently still under construction, should be finished in a month. Very similar size, a little bit different of a shape. That silver building in the back is a fabric salt shed. So there's a few types that we would use depending on, you know, the size and the cost for that. And then there's Yarmouth. It's a very different version. It's a very inviting building for a DPW. You drive by and you actually don't feel, you know, like it's a gigantic Jiffy Lube, as I'd say. But yeah, that one just finished up very recently, and everyone seemed very happy with that.
So as you can see, you know, DPWs are large metal buildings, so they're the most cost-wise efficient buildings and allow you to get the most free open space for you know, things like vehicles and things like that. So inside, you can see, you know, Brian will talk a little bit about all the cool stuff inside, but
yeah. So on the left, you could see a kind of state-of-the-art vehicle maintenance. You have a full lift for the bulldozer loader in the background, excuse me, and then you have, you know, mobile columns that you would typically see for the fire department in some of the bigger vehicles. You know, those can lift about 75,000 pounds plus sometimes. You have exhaust rails for vehicles running inside during the winter. You have the adequate ventilation that's required for maintenance that is per the building code. Currently that does not occur. You actually have to drop ducts down to the floor for that, about 12 inches off the floor to get the appropriate exhaust. And then we have all the reels in the right. You can kind of see the yellow metal structure that has all the reels for all the fluids and everything for the mechanics to place in the vehicles. Then on the right, that's actually the Yarmouth DPW interior. That is approximately 18,000 square foot interior storage. All their vehicles can fit in there in the inside. So on the right, we have bigger dump trucks, and then on the left, you can see we have a mezzanine where you can store, you know, other equipment that the DPW would typically use, seasonal road paint maybe. You know, they have a very robust building maintenance facilities division. So, you know, you could imagine there could be a lot of things up there. And then as you can see down the middle is a trench drain that would kind of catch everything as it's, you know, if it is leaking out of the vehicles.
So important things about the DPW, and just kind of letting you know what these, you know, you see square footage is on the page, but what they really result in terms of buildings. So we'll jump over to the public safety side. So, you know, just keeping with the same theme, because most people have driven by, Mansfield Public Safety in the center. On the top left is Acton Fire. So that is a fire substation, very similarly sized to the potential substation here. And that building is close to, if not net zero, with a geothermal system. So the ability to not only make the buildings efficient for operations, but efficient for, you know, the environment is really there, and we're able to do that in that site. Jumping over, top right is the community room that we talked about in Mansfield Public Safety, which is, from what I understand, booked pretty solid. They not only do their police, fire, trainings in there, they also host a number of trainings for those departments. So outside agencies come in, and the department benefits by getting kind of free seats in those trainings for hosting those. But also that room is used extensively at night for community events, community meetings, boards, committees. When I lived in Mansfield, getting a room for a board meeting was pretty tough some nights. So this is just kind of another place where they can have one of their boards or committees meet in a not too bad place. On the bottom, Nantucket Public Safety. So our department over in Nantucket. So this was built police in 2010, and then fire in 2016. So it was a public safety building built in two portions. So we're able to work kind of those things out and create really a cohesive design for the departments. And I'll turn it over to Connor to talk about kind of you know, next steps and you know, the community's ability to learn more about the project.
So first, thank you all for your patience. We know it's a very long presentation, and we are bringing it to a close. This is our planned schedule of public events for the fall. For folks who couldn't be here tonight, want to learn more in a different format than 700 slides. We have been pretty fortunate to work on a lot of pretty large projects in the past with a lot of great support from the board and the community, frankly, including enormous sewer projects, roadway projects, Blanche, Ames, construction. So we know as a team it's really important to lay out a variety of different options for folks to engage and learn more. So September is going to see a variety of formal updates to our boards and committees. We'll have municipal building committee meeting. We will be presenting a truncated version of this to the finance committee and inviting the chairs of every board and committee in Easton to come to that on Zoom. There will be in-person tours for the public on the 21st and 27th, respectively, of police, fire, and then DPW. For folks who can't make it on that date, we'll be filming video tours with ECAT and uploading those online during the month of September. We'll be at NRT and Borderlands Family Fun Day, not just because those will be fun, but we'll have a project table for folks to learn more in person. And the plan is for on October 4th, Municipal Building Committee to be voting which of these three alternatives moves forward into the next phase of project, which is schematic design. Finally, if you want to advance, please. We have a project webpage. It's easton.ma.us/MBC. This has everything you could possibly want to know about this project, going back to the 2014 Facilities Assessment Study, all the various boards and committees it's been presented to over the years, the votes that have been taken by the select board, by town meeting to advance this, and as the project advances, we'll be uploading copies of our presentations and all of our reports there so that anyone who wants to dig into this in more detail can get the proposals from our project managers and designers and really dig into the nooks and crannies there and learn more. So thank you, and we're happy to answer questions.
Well, thank you. This is a lot of information, but you presented it in a way that's very concise and very detailed at the same time, but easy to understand. I'm going to start with Jamie, because Jamie, you're on the Municipal Building Committee, so I'm interested in your perspective on this.
Yeah, I'll say first thing, if you've yet to tour these buildings, this presentation just scratches the surface. And when you've been in there and you think about us wanting to recruit a more diverse group to join, police, fire, even DPW, well, these buildings, if you came and you toured, I'd be looking at Mansfield in a heartbeat to say, you know what, let's face it, our workspace is pretty important to people from a health perspective, quality of life perspective, and quite frankly, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it's awful today. And so I've spent quite a bit of time in the police, fire, and a little bit in DPW, and I wouldn't want to be a firefighter and work out of that facility, or a police officer. And I'll say from an environmental perspective, if you've been in that building, yes, they're connected, and everything we bring into the fire side, it doesn't prevent it from spreading to the police side as well. And we've done mold mitigation over there. We've done everything we can to prop up buildings that, as we talked about, were built in the 1950s and 60s when the town population, and I'm going to throw it out there, was maybe 10,000
That's about right.
people.
Yeah.
And we're now pushing 26,000 people. We've far surpassed the useful lives of these buildings. And again, we need to be thinking about the quality of life of the people that we ask to be on the front line serving us every day. And these department heads, push right back and say, they're excellent department heads. What are we giving them to help treat their people better? And I think this is an easy one. I think this is a softball for us to pull together as a community and say, we've all learned and understand what first responders do for us. Let's go out there and show them that we're serious about it and committed to the quality of life that they deserve. So, great job. Thanks for being here. And it's a real honor to be part of the committee and to have learned as much as I have, and I'll continue to learn throughout the process.
Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate that perspective, and I thank you for serving on that important committee and representing the select board. Thanks. Craig?
I just would like to echo parts of what Jamie said, that I've taken a tour with David and the DPW, and I encourage every town member, every community member to take that tour, because you'll see what they have to work with in that DPW space and all the equipment outside. is a real concern. And we had the opportunity when former Chief Gary Sullivan retired and our new Chief Boone took over, to be in that building on Lothrop Street and seeing the desks in the hallway and being in a room with no ventilation, no windows, with I don't know how many people were there. So I can see those kinds of issues that people are talking about. And I'm very intrigued with the whole process, Jamie, of looking at all these different sites and figuring out what makes the most sense. And I look forward to hearing about response times and where, these different things. And it's a very exciting project. And I think that, as Jamie said, I think that our people deserve it. Not only the community people, but the people who work for us as well.
Thanks, Craig. Mark?
So I'm going to talk about the operational logistics piece. The quality of life for all you guys is really important, but you can't do your jobs operationally, logistically. The spaces that you have is not cutting it, not even close to cutting it. Dave, I think I've been doing this for like 7 years. Every year I turn to you and say, I don't know how you do what you do with what you have. I have no clue. You must be some sort of wizard. We saw the pictures up there. So I don't think that we can continue with what we have at all. It's the year 2022. These are 70 years old. The population has grown from 10,000 to 26,000. It's common sense to me that it's time to bring in some new buildings. An outstanding presentation. I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with and fully support you.
Jen? I think, so the concept we sometimes hear is this idea of doing more with less. And I think when you see what Dave, what the fire department, what the police department are dealing with, it's just in your face example of pushing the boundaries of doing more with less to the point where you're compromising the safety and well-being of your staff, you're compromising your ability to operate efficiently and effectively, environmental benefits, just there's a host of reasons that we're crossing that line. We've crossed it, and we can't keep doing that, which is why I think the timing of this is critically important. One of the things you spoke about a lot that was really important to me was this issue with decontamination and materials and exposure to chemicals. I worked in this space directly for years before my more recent career path took me elsewhere. And we're really just starting to scratch the surface of what chemical exposure can be doing to our health. And the fact that firefighters, and by extension of what the police department are exposed to these sorts of things, we don't have a process for dealing with it, it's really a big problem. And it has potential effects on reproductive health, on cancer rates. There's so many things that we just are starting to uncover. And when you see a facility that handles this well, it really drives home the point of how important this is. The synergies that come with proximity of having your public safety facilities work together is a really important value add that I think is hard to quantify, but we've seen in other places. And another thing that didn't get spoken about as much, but was talked about how we kind of shoehorning uses, is training facilities. We're in an environment where there's an increased value and importance continuously on training. And when you see these sites that are done, they have resources and facilities that support those needs on a regular basis, as opposed to having to go off-site or get creative with things like stairwells that get repurposed eventually because it can't even be used for safety. So I think that's all really important. And I'm excited to see what kind of environmental efficiencies come out as this process unfolds and we learn about what can be done on each site. One question I do have is, it doesn't hurt to ask now, what is the timing for talking about once a plan is selected, what other uses of the properties, the properties that are freed up? When can we have a discussion about those could be used for? I'm putting my affordable housing hat right now and saying, great opportunity here.
I see multiple nods.
Yes.
That depends. I mean, conceptually now,
yeah.
Right? And I have a feeling we may get asked in 5 minutes about that. But that's one of the exciting opportunities. It's a huge responsibility we take seriously, but one that we think we've been able to navigate with other complex projects. That not only does this create an opportunity where we can right-size facilities for our first responders to have them in safe places so they can take care of the community, it creates opportunities for us with older buildings that even if they're in okay shape, it's the equivalent of having an antique car, right? We use this analogy when we were talking about the school, that even if there was a perfect maintenance program with perfect funding, we would just have antiques, right? So if you had a perfectly maintained 1950s vehicle, you probably still don't want your toddler in the back of it, right? So you end up in a situation where if you're no longer using these sites for a municipal use, that becomes a decision for the board and with input from the community on, what do we think these sites could be? And one area is potentially affordable housing. Typically when we are doing something like this, we'll look to pre-established plans of the community, of the citizens of the community, the housing production plan, open space recreation plan, the Envision Easton master plan, to take some inspiration to start forming up some ideas that we can recommend and get ideas flowing. But there's certainly potential. And depending on which alternative is selected, there may be different pieces of real estate available in the future for reuse or redevelopment.
Okay. No, I think it's really important to make sure we have those conversations early and thoughtfully in the process, because it's a great opportunity that we certainly don't want to miss.
So I agree with everything that my fellow select board members said about the safety of our staff and our commitment to the public and the work that we do. But I think I want to approach this from a business sense. I'm thinking about going back to what we spoke about in the beginning, is the cost from these studies that we've done just to get these buildings up to the proper code and trigger ADA compliance. It's really, I wouldn't say it's a disgrace that our community doesn't have ADA compliant buildings for our public safety. We really have to be thinking about that. And every year we wait to do this, the cost is going up exponentially. So the faster that we can get this done, and to do these and consolidate these projects together for the commodity, the scale of how we put this together, I think the timing is right now. We've been trying to think about these for years, leading up to this, but now is really the time. I don't think we can wait any longer for this. And I hope, I was thinking when I was looking at the slides, I would be putting my worst slides forward of what the buildings look like. These don't even really, I think you said it, Craig, they don't scratch the surface. You have to go in person, and I would encourage people, when tours become available, go in person and experience it live. The cramped feelings, like the anxious feeling that you walk into some of these areas with the closed rooms and no windows and the air quality's bad. I'm not exaggerating. I invite people to see it themselves. But to ask people to work in those conditions, people that are really valued as our staff, the public that goes into these buildings, I think there's no exaggeration for what we need for this. So thank you for the great presentation and for all the work that every one of you has put into this. Having been on the school planning committee, it was exhaustive. We looked at every single piece and part and configuration, so I know that you've put a tremendous amount of work into this, and really excited to see what the next steps are. So I'm going to ask, there's public in the room tonight, so I assume some people are interested in this. If anybody in the public has a comment or a question and you want to come up, just let me know. Come on up to the microphone, please.
And name and address.
And state your name and address for the record, and the questions will go through me as the chair.
Okay, sure. Yeah, my name is Tom Stone. I live on Sheridan Street, and in full transparency and disclosure here, I'm a lifelong resident of Easton. I spent 34 years on the Easton Fire Department, my last 10 years as chief. And I want to commend this committee and all the work they've done. They've certainly recognized the needs of the facilities and what they're lacking and what needs to be done for the future. So I think they've done a tremendous job there. But a couple of questions, and I'm just wondering, and I know they're still working on the response time study, which I think is absolutely critical. Mm-hmm. And I hope it also includes not just road times, response times, but it factors in where the main life safety hazards are throughout the town and the facilities that they go to constantly. And I'm sure the deputy will agree that, the assisted living centers, the one on Depot Street, the nursing home on Lincoln Street, we're building a brand new school that's going to be in Lothrop Street, so we're going to have every single student in the town, with the exception of the students at the regional, are going to be located right there every day. That's a huge life safety factor. Brand new buildings, thank God that are sprinkled. Well, my question would be is, I wonder if there was any reference or research done on the previous studies that were done on the fire department. Just over the course of my career, there was 2 main studies done, and all of these issues were batted over and over again. And I know the chief's not here. He made a nice presentation, and I understand his concept of going to 2 stations. You put more firefighters in fewer facilities. That adds to firefighter safety. That cannot be argued. That's a tremendous safety factor for the firefighters. But I am concerned about the increase in run times, response times for the rest of the town. And again, in those previous studies, we batted over and over again, how could we get down? What were the best locations for 2 stations as opposed to 3? So I would really be interested in what the response time study comes up with. And then finally, this whole thing hinges tremendously on that Stonehill property. If the town's not able to acquire that property, we might be back to the drawing board in terms of making changes. So that's all I have right now.
So, Chief Stone, great comments. Appreciate all of them. I'm going to take the Stonehill one, and Ben, you were already nodding along as far as it's a great point with not just looking at the roadways, but where some of the main volume drivers are, right? Just even from 10 years ago, I think ambulance runs have doubled from about that, and total runs have gone up by more than 50%. So on the Stonehill piece, that's something that we'll be drilling down on during this period before no, way before that. If we're selection. That's right. Before we get to a point of selecting an alternative, and that came up with municipal building committee, that we don't want to find ourselves in a position or put the community in a position where we're putting our eggs in a basket that has unknowns outside of our control. As I said, Stonehill's been very open about their interest and support of this concept, and we're going to work to try to formalize that within the rules we have to follow on procurement in short order, so that we're not getting too far down that path and having to go back to the drawing board.
You can tell I'm a former fire chief, graduated from Stonehill.
And would you please answer the question as far as the life safety centers? That's great.
Yeah, so our consultant, Manitou Incorporated, is run by a former deputy fire commissioner. He has a PhD in planning, so this is kind of, comes from the fire service but has a planning background. So he is who we look to do all these things. And yes, the study does look at not only just run times from a station to an address, how it used to be done maybe 20 years ago. It looks at call concentration centers, where responses are, what responses go where, what apparatus and firefighters are at each location that they're responding from. It also incorporates, callback. It incorporates municipal aid and all of those things that affect the study. So I will not pretend to know everything about that. And I think it's important that every community is a little bit different. I'd say Easton's a little bit different than Mansfield, is a little bit different than Foxborough. And so having him come and tour with the deputy chief, who's been in town his entire life maybe, and see those areas that are not only frequent flyers, especially for the ambulance, but also kind of the hard to reach areas. You go out toward kind of the corners of town and things get a little bit harder to reach. So making sure that we understand where population density is, where call density and call volume come from, and where responses are ultimately triggered is important. I would say, in regards to the previous studies, look, they were done at the time and resulted in, us with a model that we're in currently. And I'd say over the course of time, not only has the fire department changed a bit with apparatus, staffing, and things like that, but the town has changed a bit. So where your population density and call volumes were then aren't necessarily reflective of where they are now. The constant is the station location, right? And what has changed are recent developments along 138, down Depot Street and continuing to develop down Depot Street, and down in the Foundry area, where the department currently has some challenges based on that kind of two firefighter model out of Station 3. So. Short answer is yes, all of those things are considered in that response time study. Inevitably, response times to individual addresses will change, but the goal is to get everybody in town an adequate response.
Correct, right. You can't be everywhere at the same time.
Absolutely.
I know they refer to kind of that Mansfield, you show them Mansfield headquarters there, and that model, but Mansfield's only 20 square miles, Easton's 30. So it's almost, one station per 10 square miles. But, yeah, no, like I say, you hit the, on the head, and it sounds like you got it all covered, so I'll look forward to sitting in on some more of these meetings, so.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank
We
you, Chief.
appreciate your great questions, and we thank you for your service to the town.
Well, thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Me again. Nikki Destumi and 104 Kilsyth Road. Thank you all for a great presentation, really well done and executed and presented. Just wanted to echo Select Board Member Jen Stacy's comments and once more advocate for when or if and when the town is able to consider surplus properties to keep in mind affordable housing needs. The Affordable Housing Trust recently procured a 5-year housing plan that illustrated the need for affordable senior, family, and group home needs, affordable housing needs, and just wanted to advocate for that once more, the consideration of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
I think it's awesome to have two people stand up and advocate for affordable housing tonight. So thank you for being here and staying through the presentation. Anyone else?
Andy, you've been super patient. Do you want to add anything from MBC?
Sure.
Put you on the spot.
For those who don't know me, I am the chair of the Municipal Building Committee. I've been on the committee now, I think, for about 5-6 years. And we kind of started this project in 2019 when Dave was kind enough to put together basically a list of priorities. Anyone who's read the Dora and Whittier report, I don't know who has. It takes a little bit. It's about 800-900 pages, so I have to. So Dave really helped boil that down. And one of the things we did back then as a committee is we did tour all these places. And the committee is a great makeup right now of registered professional engineers. We have a registered architect, other tech people, facilities people. So it's a really good mix. And we also have the folks from the school committee who are involved in the early elementary school project. So that's very helpful as well. But it became very clear to us looking at from a technical perspective that there's really no way to renovate those facilities when you've walked through those facilities and seen them. And really, I think what the chiefs, and there were different chiefs back then when we walked them, but Dave was there. I think the biggest thing was the programming. That's the part that really, really just jumped out at us, what they explained, what they need, and what those facilities can provide. It wasn't even close. And one of the things we did, and maybe this is a suggestion, I don't know how many people you could bring to Mansfield for a tour. Dave's going to be asked a lot, but I think we went on a tour a couple months ago over to the Mansfield facility, and that was eye-opening, And so one of the things I thought of when we watched the presentation is it always is good, because I watched the presentation through the school, and that really went through very well. I think the big thing is not only showing them kind of the conditions that we have, but maybe something close to home, that it was light years ahead. I mean, that was eye-opening to go there. I hope everyone I know we've talked about maybe doing a couple more tours there. So that was my perspective. Thank you.
That was a great point, and thank you for leading that committee for all these years.
No problem.
Thanks, Andy.
Great. So, I think the bottom line is everybody seems to be supportive of this, and this isn't a luxury, this is a necessity now. So, we're not looking to do these pie-in-the-sky projects with, all the extra bells and whistles. This is just critical to our next growth of the community and for people that are going to be our future first responders and people that will be living in this town for the next 50 years. So thank you so much for all your work on this. I can't wait to see the next part.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. before doing it. Does anybody need a break for 5 minutes?
Yeah.
All right.
It'd be nice if-
So we're going to take a recess for 5 minutes
Sorry.
and then we'll come back. 10, and that is a contract for engineering services related to the rehabilitation of the Bay Road water storage tank. It's a $2 million gallon tank built in 1959. The tank was last cleaned and painted in 2007. The proposed project involves cleaning and painting, electrical system upgrades, enhancing safety and security, and the installation of a mixing system to improve water quality. David, what else
Great.
would you like to add? Is that
Thank you. The overall contract is $149,550. It's going to be paid for or funded through the existing capital appropriation of $1.5 million that was approved last spring. So, any questions? I'd be happy to answer them.
So this is the first step towards completing this is the engineering.
Yeah, so this is the design. Most of the design's related to the mixing system, some electrical upgrades, things like that. So it's not just a straight painting job, but that's why it's a little more involved. But this is the first step, and then we'll go out for contract documents and bid the work for the construction.
Okay, thank you.
Jennifer?
No questions.
Mark?
No questions.
Jamie?
No questions.
Okay, and no questions from me, so we'll go right to a vote. Craig, do you want to make a motion?
So moved. The proposed contract is $149,550,000. So moved.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lim. All in favor? Unanimous. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Dave.
Dave.
Thank you, David.
Good night.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is an Assistant Town Administrator update for the Massachusetts opioid litigation attorneys. The Assistant Town Administrator can't be here with us tonight, so we're going to table that to the next meeting. Can I get a motion to table this to our next meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Bodger, Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. The item after that is a discussion and vote on the adoption of the Board and Committee Code of Conduct. We had talked about this a couple of weeks ago on July 11th. We reviewed the proposed Code of Conduct for boards and committees, and it has been reviewed by Town Council and sent to all board and committee chairs for their input. The newest version of the code is attached for our final review, and Connor did recommend the adoption. So, did you get any feedback, or?
I did not. I directed them to go directly to you as chair, but you know, to Dottie's credit, this was an idea that Dottie has been kicking around for some time. You know, it's a best practice to establish clear expectations on the front end with any members of an organization. We have really robust policies for our paid personnel, and we have some policies in place for our volunteers, social media policies, various state ethics compliance policies, but it's a best practice to also adopt just a general professional conduct code that lays out in more detail than the select board's ethics and values how the town you know, really believes we ought to operate in public forums so that board members and citizens, businesses, everyone feels comfortable and included in those meetings. So,
Yeah, I don't think there were any shockers in there that people don't ordinarily expect from the boards and committees, and I think the time to do this is when there's no problems or, you know, everything's, because you don't want to make it look like you're creating it because of that one committee that's,
like retaliation
you know,
type,
yeah, so it's a great time to do it now, and I guess I just would want to say that I really sincerely appreciate all the boards and committees that we have and the professional staff and the way that we can work and interact with each other. We can disagree. We can come to some types of, you know, agreements or agree to disagree, and we can do that in a professional way. It's a courtesy to our fellow committee members, and it's also a courtesy to the public. They don't like to see fighting. I don't like to see that when I watch it, you know, in other places. So I think this just really codifies what we've already been demonstrating by our behavior. So if there's no other comments or questions on that, I would take a motion to vote to accept the Code of Conduct.
So moved. Barger.
Second.
Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. Great. All right, next is the discussion and vote on the adoption of the town administrator's fiscal '23 goals and objectives. So we do have that in the packet, and I just want to say that every year this is an exciting time for us. As we look back, it gives us an opportunity to look over the past year and see what are some of the accomplishments that our town administrator has led, and what from that packet moves forward, and what new things are going to be added to that. We've been talking about looking at this in categories. So we have finance, infrastructure, facilities and public works, climate and energy policy, planning and economic development, public health, safety and community wellness, quality of life, community engagement and inclusivity, human resources management, labor relations and organizational sustainability, town government efficiency, effectiveness and resiliency, service and support to the select board. Oops, my page moved. Inter and intra-governmental relationships and professional and personal growth. So when this board votes to accept and work with these goals and objectives for the town administrator, we measure his performance on this for the next year. So this is done after the election each year, and then before the new election, this same group will vote and do the performance review on these. There's a lot. I'm not going to exaggerate. There's a lot of goals and detail in this that we actually put it into a spreadsheet this year to make it easier to look at. So I think there were more than 70 on here, and prioritized in areas that that are really important.
Daddy, I thought he was going to get to 100 this year. I'm a little disappointed.
I think it might actually.
We are we hold the bar very high for our town administrator, and as a result of that, our department heads that fall under him have subsets of all of these goals and objectives in their departments as well. So I kind of half joke about it, but when I look at this list, it's a lot and it's very detailed, and I hope people will look at this so that they can see, what are the things that we think about each year, and how do we figure out what we're going to work on for the year ahead, and how do we prioritize and see what the important things are to the people in the town. And I think the people will be surprised to see the detail of this. So Connor, do you want to call out anything in specific? This takes a while even to put together, because even as we were looking at the goals and objectives, we were thinking of more that, don't forget that one, of things that we're working on.
Sure. So a few things this year. So we changed up the format a little bit because even in doing so, I'm acutely aware of how long it is. But it used to be more just narrative in a Word document. It was getting 10, 11, 12 pages just for mine, let alone the 50 or so pages of materials I get from the department heads. And wanted to make a few formatting changes to make it a little bit more navigable and to tie things together in a few ways. So one of the major changes this year is I've basically broken it out into a kind of goal and mission statement segment, which is a shorter 3 to 4 page narrative of the policy areas that I think are critical that we be focusing our efforts on. And as part of that, including reference to the master plan. This is something I actually stole from Planning and Economic Development Director Danielson. I noticed in her staff reports to the planning board over the years, anytime a project came forward that, whether it was a subdivision with inclusionary zoning that advanced affordable housing goals or something that had mixed use, would explicitly call out how that real life example advanced goals identified by the community in the master plan. And so wanted to start building that into my own goals and every single municipal department as well. That then carries through into our iterative budget books every year, and as part of how we maintain that national standard on that. So every goal area you'll see has references to applicable master plan references. And then the objectives is more of a work plan. I think it's about 100 specific deliverables, and categorize them by kind of project area, finance, infrastructure, what the objective is, broke it out by whether this is just a recurring obligation of mine in my office, because I do feel it's important to enumerate those every single year. What, a recurring objective is come up with a budget, which is what kind of drives everything we do. Not the most glamorous note, but critically important. So breaking it out by recurring obligations versus strategic initiatives, which is basically new things, stuff that people usually want to try to ask but don't want to say, okay, great, you do the budget, cool, what's new and exciting? And so broke it out that way. And then I kind of reformatted some of the policy areas I'd been just kind of carrying forward and iterating for years at this point, and really spent some time with Dottie and some of the department heads looking at the master plan and really where we are nationally and in the Commonwealth with a tremendous amount of productive legislation happening between the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, but really climate bill. Massachusetts has a ton of climate legislation, and just concerns with inclusivity and equity that I didn't think were adequately reflected in my stated goals, although I think the work was being done by a lot of important partners in the community. And so specifically naming climate and energy policy as a goal area is new this year. I think that's really important. These are things that we do already to an extent, but I think it's really important for my office and all of us together, not just to be thinking of it in a more classic sense of energy policy on our level of looking at our Schedule Z for solar credits or looking for community aggregation to try to save money on rates for folks, which we've done. But I think organizing a collective effort, thinking of Easton 3 to 5 years from now on what are the tools and the levers that we actually have jurisdiction and control over that we can influence in a positive way to encourage net zero buildings or more EV vehicles for our own fleets, incentivizing EV throughout the community, things of that nature. So that's a new area that's identified here. COVID had its own goal area for a few years, and obviously it's not gone by any stretch, but consolidated a bit more into thinking about public health, safety, and community wellness. Really thinking about how through the pandemic we've built out community paramedicine program. We'll be working on mental health liaison position between health and police, and trying to wrap around those more proactive health and community wellness initiatives across physical and mental health with the emergency responders, so that we're working together to inform, hopefully, good policies that help people where they need it based on what we're seeing on the ground level through emergency response. Specifically identifying inclusivity as a core component of quality of life, right? Again, I think that the subtext was always there, but making that point and identifying my and our collective obligation to support municipal and community efforts and programs which promote sense of community, inclusivity, and belonging, whether that's celebrating Easton through the tricentennial effort or supporting the One Book, One Town initiative with Raising Multicultural Kids and Human Rights Committee, finding ways to help people feel valued and included in their own way across the town. Organizational sustainability. We're all kind of joking about there being about 100 deliverables here, but we do an immense amount of work here. The presentation we just touched on, I think, was a good example of that. I think we're able to do far more and punch above our weight because we have a lot of committed people here who care tremendously about their profession and the community. But much like we need to periodically look at our facilities and make sure that they are structured in a way that's sustainable in the long term, something that we need to continue to, within the resources we have, bring force to is looking seriously at the staff levels we have and how much work folks are doing. And that ties back, I think, to infrastructure, which I guess I'll pull a couple of things out there because that's really quite incredible, and Dave and the team deserve a lot of credit. We're actively managing roughly $140 million in infrastructure. So I'll just touch on these and then I'll open it up for feedback from the board. Advancing the municipal facilities project, that's not included in that $140 million figure. That is a huge effort, and we'll be applying a tremendous amount of work there in the coming 9 months through the end of the fiscal year. Advance and complete the exterior renovations and restoration at town offices. Substantial completion and occupancy of the Blanche Ames Elementary School. Advance and not fully finished, but get a lot of the major components of the Depot Street tip and Civil War monument relocation done. Advance and complete the three water treatment plants for PFAS. Advance and complete the water treatment plants for iron and manganese at well 3, 5, and 7. Bay Road water storage tank, the design contract was just awarded tonight. Washington and Elm tip is anticipated for federal fiscal year bidding in FFY 25, so continuing to support the design process there. We are in the early stages of a tip for Foundry Street. We've started community input through that, and hopefully we'll see permitting that helps make that happen for a multimodal roadway project in that corridor. We had more engagement on that one stop sign installation online than I think every post the town has made in the past 10 years. At Washington, not actually, this one's not on Washington, on Purchase and Turnpike. We're going to work with DOT. We're really happy actually right after the board voted to install that as a admittedly stopgap measure. DOT said, hey, the statistics are there. We really need to do something about that site. So that's moving. That could take years. So
When you say that site, are you talking about 138 and
yes,
Prospect?
yeah, the whole triangle. DOT
Because that was a lot of the comments, and we get that question a lot.
Sure.
Why can't you do something about that? So
That's right, because
Mass
Washington is
DOT
not our road.
Right. So for them to step up and
They're
want
engaging
to
with
move
us
that
now.
forward is really
It's
big
huge.
news.
Yeah, there are letters on file from town administrators who were here when I was in elementary school requesting this. So this is pretty important. We know folks want it. We do too. So that's starting to move. That's really important. And then grant-funded repair for Lincoln Street sidewalks. That's Complete Streets grant. Wayfinding town-wide signage. That's MassWorks. Main Street Bridge and Culvert design through Small Bridge Program. The town office's HVAC improvements through Green Communities, town office EV charging stations through Green Communities, and then multiple millions of water main and road repairs. So that's our infrastructure plan for the next 12 months, which is enormous. Obviously, we have huge planning initiatives. We're supporting the Oaks Ames Hall project. I would like to get a lot more ambitious on climate and energy, as I've identified. We're working to look and see if there's any capacity at all within our net metering cap. Unfortunately, that wasn't touched by any of the recent rounds of climate legislation on the state level. And continue to advance the ARPA plan and a whole host of other things, but I won't read the whole list. So I provided this board in advance. Happy to get any feedback or suggestions on it. And a lot of credit to the department heads. A lot of these ideas are coming up, much like we try to inform it from the top down of the master plan of the budget, also pull from what the department heads can identify in their ranks on things that matter. So.
Great. Comments, questions?
I continue to be amazed at the amount of work that is on your plate, Connor, and on the plate of the people who work for us. It's very impressive. And as you go through all of the infrastructure kinds of projects that we're working on, it's amazing to think about all the things that are happening in this town and that have been happening in this town. It's pretty impressive. So kudos for the work that you do.
Jen?
It's ambitious, and every year, look at what you have planned and say how is Connor and the department heads in the town going to achieve this, and these things happen. So, my biggest concern is always just being overextended. It sounds like from what you said early on that you're mindful of that, and I know from conversations you are constantly aware of that. So
it's a huge concern for all of us. And one of the ironies, we were just joking. These facilities we're in are all so antiquated that even in the instances where our operating budget is positioned in a healthier place and we can add staff, we don't have anywhere to put them.
Right. Mark?
Same thing Jen said, ambitious. It's strange because on one hand, this is great, accomplish all of that, that's amazing. And literally on the other hand, I'm concerned about burnout. You guys have a lot on your plate. You've been going at a rate that's unbelievable for years. So it's a strange thing to hear from me. I should be very cognizant of burnout for you and your staff and all your department heads, because that's important to not hit that level.
Thank you.
I think, Connor, you do that. You exemplify, I think, what it is to be both a servant leader and you look out for your people. And you're right. I think we're just asking you to make sure you take the same for yourself, and I like seeing that you're taking time off. I think that's hugely important, and I think you've created enough leaders within your ranks that you can comfortably take time off, and we know that Michael Blanchard's been an example of that too. But that's important because people who can't delegate and are unable to back themselves out or don't have responsible leadership underneath themselves cannot accomplish very, incredible goals such as these, which you do every year. So we don't come here and ever say, well, why didn't you accomplish this, that, or the other? No, you successfully continue to do it. So thank you, and thanks for continuing to grow as a leader.
Thank you.
And so I'm really happy to hear my fellow board members talk about the concern for stress and burnout and overwork for Connor and for our department heads. We talk about that a lot, Connor and I. And, I tell him that my biggest concern is the health and mental well-being of the people that are in our staff. And it's great to accomplish all this, but it has to be a realistic expectation. And sometimes if we have to move things to slide it in a different particular order, we had a priority setting meeting and we ended up adding 2 items to the 70+ item list. So we were going in the wrong direction on that, but we did actually have a really good conversation about prioritizing, and maybe something has to move out of this year into next year. We have to be honest when we come to those crossroads on things, and we can't look at that as a negative. We have to look at that as sometimes you have to right size the expectations. And even with interaction with the community, we're very quick to respond back and get back to people right away, but sometimes if it doesn't happen in 15 minutes, that people have to know that it could take a couple of days to get back, if you're in the middle of projects or if you took a couple of days off. So I think we just have to be realistic with ourselves and with the people that we work with. I love that you always put the bar higher, but you're not going to be any good to us or the community if you burn yourself out or you get sick, and the same thing with the people that work for you. So that's my soapbox of advice right now. But that said, we really appreciate the communication, and that's something that I want people at home to know, is that there's so many moving parts on this all the time, and Connor is really good about keeping us updated and so that we can make well-informed decisions on the things that we vote about.
I appreciate that, and I suppose I would, I guess, in response and recognition of that, just add that they are always failing, but word is failing me, but aspirational. We are fortunate, we have an awesome team here. We deliver on almost all of these things, but I would just preemptively ask that, given we've never had more projects going on, that if certain schedules slide, I could always point to supply chain, but sometimes we need to just take a pause. And I really appreciate the note about responsiveness. We, myself, our department heads, we try to follow up with folks. We're easy to get. All of our emails are online. There are times where we just can't follow up instantly. And we try our best. And I take delegating very seriously. And because of that, everyone is super busy and they have a lot of projects going on. So I guess just patience sometimes if we're not instantly responsive on things because we're trying to advance a lot of these 10 and 50-year projects. And I appreciate the support.
All right, so we will take a vote to adopt the town administrator's fiscal year 2023 goals and objectives.
So moved, Barger.
Second.
Barger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, Connor.
Thank you.
Next, we have some donations to the fire department and the police department in memory of Joe Lawler. So the Easton Fire Department received a donation of $75 from Elliot and Karen Antman in memory of Joe Lawler. He was an asset to the Easton Community Emergency Response Team, the CERT team, and he had overseen radio controls. So that was one. There was another one for a $75 donation from Karen and Sydney, also in memory of Joe Lawler, as an asset to the CERT team. And another one for $300 from, I apologize if I mispronounce the name, but Obiageli Ukadike in memory of Joe Lawler. And then for the police, there was a $100 donation from an anonymous donor that walked into the police station lobby to thank Sergeant Brine Tanks, I'm sorry, this is too small for me to read, for his help on a prior call for service, and they insisted on handing him a $100 bill. After several attempts to explain that the donation wasn't necessary, they left the money on the table in the police station lobby and left. So we are grateful that people are insistent upon sometimes making these donations, and it's very much appreciated by the police and fire and by the select board. So can I put all of these on the
Sure,
slate?
you could do a slate to accept all the donations from the gift accounts for the respective departments.
Okay, so that is...
So moved.
Second.
So that's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. And with gratitude, we'll accept those donations.
Absolutely.
And they'll be put to good use. So next we have items 14, 15, and 16. We have 3 resignations. We have the resignation of Eric Silverman from the Agricultural Commission. His term expired June 30th, 2023. We have another resignation from Grant West, also of the Agricultural Commission, with a term expiring June 30th, 2023. And a resignation of Robin Haverly from the Green Communities Committee with a term expiration of June 30th, 2024. So we will have those openings posted on the website under the volunteer section on the front page of the website. Bottom left, you'll see a link for volunteer. I'd encourage people in the community to look at that, read the charge of the committee, and if it's something that might interest you, please fill out the form, and we'll take a look at that and be voting on replacements at a future date. So I'd like to have a motion to accept these 3 resignations as a slate, and then we'll do a motion, a second, and a roll call vote for the slate. But I want to thank Eric Silverman, Grant West, and Robin Haverly for their work on these committees, and with appreciation for their dedication. So could I get a motion, Craig?
So moved.
Second.
Bodger and Lamb, and now we'll do a roll call vote starting with you, Craig.
Okay, so all 3 of them?
Just slate.
Oh, just slate?
Yeah.
Barger slate?
Lamb slate.
Stebbins slate.
Stacy slate.
And Fulgenetti slate. Okay, and if I didn't skip anything, we are at number 17 now, which is a discussion and a vote for opening of the special town meeting warrant, November 14th, 2022. Feels like we do this every other week. Every time we turn around, we're opening a warrant.
How you know summer is coming to a close. It is that time of year. I recommend the board consider and vote to open a warrant for a special town meeting to be held Monday, November 14th at 7 p.m. at OA High School. This is a date that works for the principals of town meeting, the chair of select board, moderator, council. It works for the schools. It's available that night. And it's good for, fits the financial calendar and gets us in before Thanksgiving. So kind of has to be that night. We backed it in. So we would recommend the board vote to open the warrant for article submittal to our office no later than September 21st, 2022, as is our practice following a vote tonight. Our staff will send a memo to all board and committee chairs and department heads soliciting warrant articles that can't wait till May.
Perfect. Comments or questions? Motion to open the town meeting warrant?
Motion to open the town meeting, the special town meeting warrant for Monday, November 14th, 2022.
Second.
That's Bodger and Lamb, all in favor? Unanimous. Great. The next item is acceptance of our minutes dated August 1st, 2022 and August 9th, 2022. Anybody have any comments or questions on those?
There was one correction, I believe, that Craig noted to Elizabeth that was sent out for everyone, so I would just recommend any motion there would be as amended.
There was a slight addition to the first page.
Yep, so a motion to accept those minutes
As amended.
Second.
Just one other, I'm sorry, I just saw, this is, I think the August, what was the one when, August 9th, right? For a liquor license? That's all it was, right? It was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm on here as voting, I was not there. It'd just be the second, one-day liquor license, There's a motion by Barger, second by Stebbins. Just got to scratch that. It was probably seconded by you.
Yep.
All right. So Craig made a motion to accept the minutes as amended. Mark seconded it. All in favor? Unanimous. Great. Town administrator notes?
None.
Select board notes, Craig?
I don't have anything.
Mark?
I don't. Are you going to talk about the economic forum?
No, but you should.
Well, I don't know, but you were present for it, so that's why if you could
Oh,
share
that's
your
right, you weren't
experience.
there, I
No,
forgot.
I couldn't be there. Want that
You're
note
there in
too.
spirit.
All right,
But I
will.
want that brought up, but I wasn't there to
Of
speak
course.
about it, so.
Terrific, I will do that. Jamie?
I just want to say thank you to Kristen Kennedy and to Christina Redford. So Christina Redford, being the chair of the Green Communities Committee, has been working very closely with Kristen Kennedy. And this past Saturday, I apologize for having not helped promote this before the hand, but they held a Green Communities Committee table at the town pool, and Kristen really helped organize it, and there was pretty good attendance for a 10 to 2 at the town pool on a Saturday, where people got to interact and learn a bit about what the Green Communities Committee is doing, and learn about recycling and a number of other initiatives, and talk about water use and why it's so critical that right now we band together as a community and try to limit the use of water, as we're in dire, well, should be in a great restriction, but dire need right now of rain. So thank you for raining today. But anyway, great job on their part, and they continue. And huge regret to lose Robin for some family reasons that she's needed to pull back. But what another great asset to the team, and we hope to fill her shoes.
Great, thank you, Jamie. Jen?
Nothing tonight, thank you.
So thank you for reminding me about the Economic Development Forum. We had worked with the Chamber of Commerce, and Northeastern Savings Bank hosted us at their facility to have an Economic Development Forum. Stephanie and her team did a really great job putting that together. And we had some really good members of the business community there. We had Margaret LaForest from the Mass Office of Business Development talking about different initiatives that they were doing. It was a really great conversation. I got a lot out of it, and we really appreciated the businesses coming to talk about how they got through COVID and what some of their future plans are, workforce development goals. Anything else you can think of that I should call out?
No, I think workforce was one of the big issues that everyone was facing, trying to get people hired and working. So I think Margaret had a lot of good ideas, opportunities and programs, mass hires.
Yep.
And it was a good turnout, good discussion.
Yeah, so it is if anybody really wants to watch it, it is online. You can watch it if you go onto ECAT's page, or it's on social media on a number of different places, the Economic Development Council page.
If I could add just one other thing, an interesting point that was a little surprising.
Melanie, come to the microphone.
I think we were a little surprised that when the businesses were talking about hiring, they were also talking about the need for housing that workforce could afford. So that ties in with a lot of what you heard earlier tonight about how much affordable housing is really an issue and needed in Easton.
And just thinking about the way that, since COVID, the way that we're working and the way that things have changed, I probably said this several times on here, but one of the things I'm always going to have as a takeaway from COVID with regard to this committee is one night when we were on a select board meeting, and Mark, your 2 kids came in to give you a kiss goodnight on camera. That, your kids all coming to the Memorial Day parade and being in that. There was a little girl that was probably 4 years old. Her dad was one of the businesses, and somebody, one of the speakers asked, who here is the owner of a small business? And she just raised her hand. So I just thought that was it's so great to have, to see the new way that we work, the way that we go to meetings, and we make way for all kinds of adjustments and bringing family members, and I just think that that's pretty cool. So the next thing, just another reminder that the last night of the summer concert series is this Wednesday night. It's going to be really great. We're going to be having free pizza, ice cream. It's the grand finale, so if anyone can make it, please go. Bring your family. people sit on the Rockery across the street, they're at the schoolhouse apartments across the street, they're on the sidewalks, they're everywhere on the lawn. It's a lot of fun, so come for a little bit, come for the whole night. Hope to see you there. And then last but not least, I would just like to say, I think it's coming up in the next week, but now that I don't have little kids, when's the first day of school?
Wednesday?
It's a week from Thursday.
A week from Thursday?
Yeah.
So good luck to all the families when we hear all the parents singing and dancing and cheering in the morning. I used to have a pool party on the first day of school for all the moms, but I just want to say to people, really, really be careful with your driving, especially this time of year. There's a lot of sun glare. There's going to be little people crossing roads and, on sidewalks. So I hope that people will be thinking about that when they're out heading to work and heading home from work.
And a lot of construction as well.
And the ongoing construction. Although I did go through the construction, and I was amazed that the road has changed shape again.
Which
The one where the monument was.
Oh yes. I mean, the goal is we're asphalt would have started today, but it rained. So this week they're going to start getting asphalt down. That is the goal. That there are roads for folks connected to all the schools. So a lot of long hours and Saturday shifts for pavers. So.
And also, I'd like to give a big shout out to ECAT. You guys have been very flexible to go where we go. Right now, the Select Board's office is a mail house for early voting. So we're kind of bouncing around to different places. It's a little bit difficult to set up this camera equipment, have good audio and good production, and we really appreciate that you guys are doing such a great job with that.
Thank you.
So with that, we're going to go into an executive session under Purpose 6 of Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 21A, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property for negotiating 388 Center Street and 360 Washington Street. We're going to go into executive session, not to return to open session. So I would take a motion, a second, and then we're going to have a roll call vote to go into executive session, and then we'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Barger.
Second.
Bodger and Lamb,
Barger, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Stebbins, yes.
Stacy, yes.
and Full Janetti, yes. And a motion to adjourn, Craig? Do we need that or
No,
not?
you don't. Your motion was to
Was
go
to
into
adjourn.
executive session,
Okay.
not to return. So we're good.
All right, sounds good. Thanks so much, everyone.